this case, yes it is. This isn't us trying to shove puzzle pieces together like Scott warned us against. It's about seeing that in one puzzle, there's a piece that fits in a certain location, and in a separate puzzle, you have a similar piece that might end up acting in a similar way. And here's the thing, you don't have to take my word on
Read
this
Matt
anymore.
okay,
Scott
Game Theorist.
recently made a new post
His
about
name is
all of
Game
this
Theorist.
to clarify the situation.
Very
In
cool.
response to the
Very
question
glad that
whether
you're
the
happy.
lore of
Very happy that
Fnaf
you're
is
interviewing Matt
solvable,
Pat.
he said this. All I can
Congratulations,
do is
my
say that
guy.
some questions will be answered, even if it may not always be the answer you wanted. Be patient. Let me at least say this. Future games will look forward, but look to the novels to fill in some of the blanks to the past. So there you have it, from the creator himself. Does including the books in our discussions make things messy and complicated? Sure.
It's
But
in, alright,
remember
for
what
sure, bro.
franchise we're talking about here, friends. Messy and complicated is like the formal first name that Five Nights at Freddy's never uses. Call it McFnaf. Messy, complicated Five Nights at Freddy's.
Messy,
The long and
complicated,
short of it is
bruh.
that when it comes to this franchise, we as theorists have always had to be discerning over what clues are helpful and which ones are just red herrings. This is no different now. Back when we only had the games, we did it with the number of Foxy Toes and Freddy buttons. Did a missing button mean it was a new animatronic? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Now, we just have to do it with time-traveling ball pits and sound illusion discs. And here's the last thing I'm gonna say on the issue, and hopefully it's the last time that I have to talk about it. At this point, where there's soon to be more books than there are games in this franchise.
That's a lot of
think about
books.
To wrap your head around that one. To dismiss the
What the
books
frick?
entirely at this point is just short-sighted. And I'm not just saying that because we're referenced in the new book Fetch. Yeah, seriously, we're in it. From page, well,
Oh, Fetch is
I read it
from-
digital, so it's like
Interesting.
page
Okay, cool.
250
It's from the
out of
books.
1127. Quote, Greg did tune back in, though, when Kimberly Bergstrom raised her hand. Well, he sort of tuned back in. He heard her question, is this just a theory? She probably didn't actually say it that way.
That's
That
funny.
was just my creative interpretation of that line. Look, Ma, I'm an inside joke hidden inside the second installment of a multi-volume scholastic book series. I've made it. Anyway, meta discussion over. Let's talk about this new book and what it means for the franchise.
Okay.
shall we? Fazbear Frights #2 Fetch was recently released, and it is, well, if I'm being honest, it feels much less connected to the series than the first one. Don't get me wrong, the stories are still really good, if not even darker than the original three. I mean, one has a young girl outright being mauled to death and wrapped in a sheet while she lays there dying, so pretty intense stuff. But the connections to the main lore are definitely a bit shakier this time around. I mean, the first book, Into the Pit, featured cameo performances by Golden Bonnie, Baby, Funtime Freddy, the Missing Children's Choir, and more. This one, meanwhile, introduces us to a lot of new things. A smartphone-powered animatronic dog named Fetch. Tiny, free-roaming versions of Freddy Fazbear called Lonely Freddies. We do get some quality time with Plush Trap, but, you know, it's Plush Trap. It's like the D-stringer in the Fnaf canon alongside the Bitty Babs and the Endoskeleton 2. Is that a hot take? Did I just offend the Plush Trap stands? I mean, the runt barely squeaked into Ultimate Custom Night as is. I'm just saying here, guys. Anyway, let's walk through these 3 new horror stories.
That's funny.
And what they mean for the franchise.
Plush Trap didn't do
Story
anything, huh?
number 1,
In the actual
Greg and his
series.
2 friends Hattie, and Cyril live near Olympia, Washington. Greg feels compelled to explore an old abandoned Freddy's restaurant where he discovers Fetch, a fearsome animatronic dog with sharp teeth and an even sharper understanding of texting lingo. Quote, how long has this place been empty? Greg asked. Fetch looks
Yo,
like he's older than my
General
dad, but
Dex,
smartphones
rating with
haven't
Party
been
4.
around that long.
Appreciate you stopping by.
After
Thank you for
he's
rating as
around
well.
Pizzeria, the dog
Damn,
goes
bro.
out to Fetch,
Hell
and
yeah, how you guys
walks
doing?
with increasingly
As you can tell,
results, killing
I
a
am
dog,
currently
ripping his
binging
eyes,
every
girl,
FNAF
and eventually retrieving
game
his
theory.
crush in
Currently
the
on
best
video
way possible.
33
It's actually a pretty
out of
simple story, but
60.
there are 2 big things
So,
to call out about it. First,
there's
it
that
continues a theme that
for
we're
ya.
starting
How you
to
guys doing?
develop in these
Appreciate you
books.
stopping by.
Kids are being drawn to these restaurants. It's never explained in the story,
I just found out that
but
Fetch
Chills
existed,
to go to Freddy's by
which I
some
probably knew
unseen
before.
force. Quote,
The problem is,
might be what he'd felt in the
damn, you're
first
watching all of them.
book.
I am watching all of them.
And again, a bit later in the
Yeah.
chapter, Greg was afraid
Look
to
at
run out of
the
time,
timestamps of the
therefore
hours
he
on the
had
top.
done what he
See?
was meant to do.
Up there.
Greg is now the
You-
second character to have some sort of
I've spent
psychic
almost like
connection to these
over 9
restaurants.
hours
Let's
at this
talk about
point.
our last theory, Oswald
Is it
from
10
the
already? Yeah,
had
10
been
hours
seen
at the very
where
least
he
watching this.
inexplicably found
Not in one
himself
sitting,
on a
because I can't do one
rampage
sitting because I have school and stuff like
without
that.
ever knowing about
But I am
Freddy.
watching all of them.
It's also worth noting that
So yeah, I
all
am
the
doing that.
first
Thank you guys
stories in their
for
respective books.
rating. I really
It's
appreciate
interesting
it.
to see
Hell
whether
yeah.
this trend holds in future
But I just learned
the
that Fetch was a
second thing
thing.
the story, though, is that it clearly
Because I was thinking about like, oh, remember
establishes
Sparky the
technology
dog from the early days of
beyond where
FNAF?
the rest of society
Like people were like
is.
thinking
As I
like,
read in
oh,
that earlier
like a dog
book,
animatronic
Fetch
is in
can
the
connect to smart
in the
devices
rest in
like
the
cell
is in
phones,
the
despite being
game
older than the
when
kids'
there was
parents.
never a
The
dog
reason
animatronic.
I
You know what I mean?
call this out is that in theory
It was
connecting
just
to
a
this
thing,
franchise, I've
just
seen a
a
lot of theorists use
interesting
more modern,
idea, I
sleeker
guess.
designs of the Funtime animatronics to put them later in timelines. But it seems like this story is telling us that those sorts of details don't matter. Freddy's is and will always be fantastically ahead of the curve when it comes to technology, especially technology for kidnapping small children. There was a bit more in that story about
why
random event
also why
generated
is it so like technical?
being able to read
Why is
our
this
minds and
series like so
subjects up to via mental
technologically
but
advanced
quite think
than
of
like
how important
the entire
the
rest of the
actual
world
overarching
in this
narrative of the
universe, right?
franchise, so maybe
That is just
there's a
interesting for me.
discussion for a mini theory at some point down the line, but for now, I'm just gonna skip it. Story number 2, we'll come back to in a minute, as that one has the most to discuss. Story number 3, out of stock. A new plush trap toy, the Plush Trap Chaser, a light-activated chomping green rabbit, is all the rage, selling out at stores across the nation. It also retails for $79.99.
Thank you for following, bro. I
So
really
Scott
appreciate it.
be
Hell
making
yeah.
those fat stacks both IRL and
Thank you,
in the
General
real world for
Dex.
his killer merch.
Appreciate the
A boy
follow.
named Oscar,
And I'm just gonna be
never getting what he
like
wants,
watching the
shoplifts the last
all
rhyme
the
that someone had
game theories
supposedly
for like
written
my
or
next few
read.
streams. So you know,
Quote,
that's what you're gonna get for
is
now.
it me, or do the teeth look wrong? Isaac pointed at the straight, slightly yellow, human-looking teeth that were visible through Plush Trap's partly
That's pretty
opened
cool. Yo,
mouth.
Birdie04, thank you for following, bro. I appreciate it. Hell yeah.
Reached out and poked one of the cloud
Really appreciate it, guys. You guys are great,
He put his
honestly.
hand back and flicked his finger. It's squishy. End quote. After a few days of it doing nothing, the plush trap suddenly activates and terrorizes Oscar and his friends, chomping through the house's doors and garages just
Interesting.
trying to bite them. Their only protection is that plush trap freezes in the light. Quote again, he was turning the box over and over in his hands, and there in bold letters...
Yo,
was
Chad
a
McRad, thank you for following, bro. I appreciate it. Hell yeah.
Freezes
You're
in the
great, bro.
light.
Hell yeah.
A few hours and a comedic number of faulty flashlights later, the boys destroy the monster at last by luring it in front of an oncoming train. A few things to call out here in this story. First and most
Can you just
obviously,
shoot
it explains
the
Plush
toy?
Trap's behavior in Fnaf
You know what I mean?
4.
Like
He
shine a flashlight at it and then just like, you know,
haunted toy that goes
grab
on
a grab a
rampage and is
whole
stopped by the power of flashlights.
grab
So it's
grab an
cool to get
axe, you
that
know,
more
just chop it
connection
down.
with Plush Trap's
That seems like the
behavior.
most
We also know, based on the story, that
you know what I mean?
Plush
Like the most
apparently
easiest
has
way
the
to
ability
get rid of
mimic
them though.
voices. He has a speaker system.
That's just
built
my
into
idea,
his
though.
fur and is able to mimic the voices of Oscar's mother and friends. Now, this is a really interesting detail because up until this point, the only voice mimics in the franchise have been the Funtime animatronics, with their built-in systems intended to lure children away from their parents.
These designs are so weird, bro.
The possibility that
Those are not how animatronics look at all.
for those larger
I just don't get why they're just all like tentacle wire things. I never got that. I always thought they looked like super strange. Like all Scott could think up of when building these animatronic models are just wires and pipes everywhere. No actual skeletal structure, which is, you know, obviously not the good idea.
Oscar runs away with has both human eyes and teeth. Quote from the book. Raj turned to Oscar. You managed to steal us the only plush trap chaser that looks like a half-human hybrid. End quote. Now, this idea of a half-robot, half-human animatronic is a completely
I like your
new
minion in the
concept
back.
for the series. But is it? You see, in Fnaf 4, we had ourselves Nightmare, the black, transparent, spooky bear that, if
No, you
looked
don't.
closely enough, had a human brain in its head as a part of its design. A detail that pretty much all of us dismissed. I mean, all of us glossed over Nightmare in general.
Just
is
collects
like
it
the embodiment
out of
death.
nowhere.
The game's Grim Reaper as the crying
Yeah.
child slowly flatlines in his hospital bed.
Very
Or,
cool.
You know, just a figment of the boy's haunted imagination.
That's just how it be
This
sometimes, you know what I mean?
context from Fazbear Fright,
You
could
stuff gets
Nightmare
punched.
have actually been a
What can I say?
real experiment?
That's toxic, by the
Was
way.
William Afton in his quest for immortality, or Henry in his quest for more lifelike robots, testing the human brain's ability to survive in and operate an animatronic body. This would make Nightmare the literal Frankenstein's monster.
Bro called me
of
toxic for
family
punching a
entertainment dining.
minion, dog.
Even though I say that
Ain't no
jokingly,
way,
it's also
dog. Ain't no
something that
way.
appears in the Curse of Dreadbear DLC for FNAF Help Wanted, where we actively
This is-
program a brain and insert it into Dreadbear's head before Hand Unit tells us this.
Well done. It's time to introduce the creature to the kids for focus testing and troubleshooting.
We know, based on the original trilogy of books, that Afton was obsessed with recreating living metal just like those original haunted animatronics. I see Nightmare, Dreadbear, and this plush trap all as potential experiments looking to do exactly that. Lastly, we come to story
Was
number 2,
Nightmare
Lonely
an
Planet.
actual
My
experiment?
personal
I thought it was
favorite
just like a
bunch. In this
nightmare
one, we
kind
have
of thing.
rebellious teen Alex
Like a legit
looking to
nightmare.
expose his goody two-shoes sister Hazel Hazel for the fraud that she really is. Alec, in this story, is actually a really tragic character. He's a teen who acts out because he's ignored by his parents. And the main reason he's trying to bring down his sister is because she is always the one who gets the attention. The two of them inexplicably team up to torment their parents in the lead up to Hazel's birthday party at Freddy Fazbear's, with Alec planning on double-crossing her the day of the party. When the day arrives, Alec's plan backfires. It's revealed that Hazel is truly just that pure and good of a person. It's been Alec who's been the jerk, pushing everyone around him away, thinking himself as the victim when he was actually making himself into the victim. With the parents just trying to cater to his needs and Hazel just wanting a brother who liked her, Alec runs off, ashamed of his actions, and hides in the storage closet. Just as he's
It's actually Freddy Fazbear's monster. Freddy Fazbear was a scientist.
Short little lonely Freddy, free-roaming
I just realized it. I was like, what are you talking about? It's actually Freddy Fazbear's monster. Freddy Fazbear with the science. I like how that took me a moment to. I like how that took me a moment to like comprehend for a moment, dude. Great, good joke. I applaud you for that one, bro. Bro, you actually got me, dude. Bro, that's so stupid, dog. Oh my gosh. That was great. That was great. Funny joke.
Hey,
oh my gosh.
The voice in his head quiet at first, but quickly it was screaming,
okay.
Hey, that's not me! That's not me! His eyes, his stolen...
I actually kind of want to read these short stories.
And then,
but I haven't got around to it because I want to read more. I just don't have time for it, honestly. Because I'm streaming, content creation, all that stuff. School, work. I actually don't work right now, but I don't have the time for it.
He's puked down by one of the kids at the party. He's picked up and thrown into the dumpster, where he meets a couple new friends. One final quote. His fall was broken by dozens of plush bears that looked exactly like him. Dozens of discarded lonely Freddies.
I always like those kind of twist endings where it's like, twist ending, not the only one, or like there's more, or like there's like a cycle, you know what I mean? I always like those kind of endings.
Dozens of the lonely ones. Ah, what a great closing line for that story.
Nice.
It is so heartbreaking to see this misguided kid suddenly learn to love his family, only to have his chance at redemption ripped away by these animatronics. It is so sad as a story. But here's the thing, for as sad as it is, this story carries over yet another recurring theme that we're seeing develop in these books, that animatronics are
I honestly like those kind of endings. Or even if it's not like a good ending, it's more like a bittersweet. I do enjoy bittersweet. Well, I also like hate them though. You know what I mean? Like I kind of like, because you want a good ending in your stories, but not every ending can be good. So the bittersweet is like the next step up. But I just do like the desolate endings. So like maybe you've survived, maybe you've like won the battle, like you've lost so much already, but like it doesn't feel like a win. Like as a writer myself, I do kind of like those endings, and I want to incorporate that more into my writings. As time goes on.
Through us. But what we thought was happening on a small scale, one person getting taken over in one game, instead appears to be happening to kids in pizzerias everywhere. It's further evidence supporting this theory that I did on Fnaf VR, where the story from this
what if it's like
is basically
that one meme where it's like do not trust the government or whatever, and it's just like these guys in like a room, and it's like a giant screen of like a dude in the back like going, do not trust, do not listen, do not do this, do not do that. But it's just like a map pack game theory video, and all the guys are looking at him like they're being brainwashed. That'd be funny. I wonder if you shove ChatGPT, but I wonder if you can get ChatGPT to like look over all these videos and what's it called? To look over all these videos and just to calculate like the timeline based off of all of MatPat's videos. That would be interesting. You can't do that though, because ChatGPT is like too simple, I guess, to be able to do that.
He's here, he's there, he's everywhere. Who you gonna call? Psychic friend
Fredbear.
But in order to tell you why, I'm gonna need a bit more time. So until then, my friends, there's only one last thing to say. Do you want to save money on pizza? Yeah, that's right. All this Freddy Fazbear has gotten me hungry for a nice old slice of pizza. Luckily, restaurants and food delivery are considered to be essential businesses right now, which means that you can still get yourself a
oh, that's right.
delivered right to your door.
This is when the pandemic is going on. Nice. Dun 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 dun.
he's your buddy. When your brother is a jerk, he's your pal. When your dad is
I like how out of all people, MatPat is capable of
at least until
MatPat is capable of what is it called, falsetto? No, it's not.
He's here, he's there, he's everywhere.
What is it called? When like in your voice like goes up and down a little bit?
Psychic friend Fredbear.
Right there, right there. When it Fredbear.
For reasons still
Why is he still going, bro?
On your way back home, he makes a promise that throws off all the lore. Seriously, Scott, what is this line for? Is it supposed to be in a slightly different yellow font here? Are you meaning this to be figurative or literal? Because if it's literal, you are opening up a literal can of worms. He's here, he's there, he's everywhere.
Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Psychic friend Fredbear. He's here, he's there,
Why is it?
he's
Why is he still going?
Who you gonna call? Psychic friend Fredbear.
Bruh. Nice. Why does I feel like the Game Theory,
Hello, Internet.
the
Welcome
Doom,
to Game Theory,
the
where I
Doom
start
intro,
off
the Doom
today
song.
with a disclaimer.
Warning.
In entering this video, and honestly all of my theories, you are entering a zone of speculation, where any idea is valid for consideration in the hopes that it solves more problems than it creates, answers more questions than it raises, or ties together dangling pieces of evidence in a narratively satisfying way. Am I trying to solve the lore? Yes. Am I doing it by asking really extreme over-the-top questions, looking into very specific details way too closely, and more often than not drawing connections between concepts that probably aren't connected at all? Absolutely yes. Side effects of entering the theory zone may include a blown mind, total and utter confusion, a deeper appreciation of your favorite franchises, fun stories to share with friends, a head full of random factoids that will at no point aid you in life, and disillusionment about human existence and our own place in the universe. Enter at your own risk. Disclaimers aside, theory crafting is a tricky needle to thread. A good theory is one that has enough evidence to support it, but not so much evidence that it's basically a known fact. It requires extrapolation, thinking beyond just the stuff that we're given, but not so far past that you're overreaching or making baseless claims.
Sand
All of that while
is
still maintaining a satisfying
glitch
story.
trap?
A story that stays true to
What?
the franchise that you're talking about while not being afraid to take that known
That'd be so
story
funny if he
and
just
move
drops the
off to
Sans in there.
riskier directions. In a lot of
Honestly,
ways,
that's the
theory
first time we've
crafting
seen
is like writing fan
Sans
fiction,
in
just,
any of these
with
videos.
more evidence and
Good on you,
less
MatPat.
aggressive
Nice.
cuddling. A lot less aggressive cuddling than
Bruh.
some of the fan fictions I've
That's
been
great.
exposed to over the years.
Why is he exposing himself to fanfiction
Anyway,
for,
the
bruh?
reason that I say all of this right now is that today's theory is, how do I put it? It's one of the stretchier ones. Like, there are some theories
Let me
that
fix
are
this
rock
real quick.
solid. There's some really strong evidence in the game, and it's supported by stuff that's been said by the developers or creators. Then there are others that require a bit more creative license, where the connections are there, but they might require you to squint a little bit, or just, you know, have fun with it and go along for
Okay,
the ride.
MatPat.
This episode is
Where's
one of
where's
those
the theory?
theories, because today we're once again
Give me the
diving into
theory.
the world of Fetch, Book 2 of the Fazbear Fright series. You see, last time I mentioned this. Fetch was recently released, and it is, well, if I'm being honest, it feels much less connected to the series than the first one. The connections to the main lore are definitely a bit shakier. This one, meanwhile, introduces us to a lot of new things. A smartphone-powered animatronic dog named Fetch, tiny free-roaming versions of Freddy Fazbear called Lonely Freddies. And that felt weird to me. Every story of the first book felt very connected to established characters, from Golden Bunny suits to shape-shifting baby to Funtime Freddy. So why was this one, the second book, doing so many new things? It felt like a pretty extreme tonal shift, especially considering Scott had just posted about how these books would fill in some of the blanks from the past. So then I thought about it, and I considered what blanks from the past this odd collection of stories might be trying to fill, and something clicked. I think that there's a chance that one of the new inclusions in this book is actually something that we've known about for a long time. An oddball character that's confused us and stymied our theories for years. I believe that there's a chance that Fetch's Lonely Freddies may actually be the real identity of Fnaf 4's psychic friend Fredbear. You remember?
I don't
Doll
know.
from FNAF 4 with the living eyes
That's a bit of a
that
stretch,
that
honestly.
walked around the room, that stalked you in the streets and disguised itself as a flower. The thing
Oh,
that could actually read the crying child's innermost thoughts. I think that guy was a type of Lonely Freddy doll.
But it
to
was like
truly
watching
understand why I think
the
these
kid,
two are
though.
connected, let's begin
I don't
with
think it was
Lonely
a
Freddy's story. To quickly
Lonely Freddy. I think it
recap
was
the
just
story in a bit more
Freddy
detail
with
than
like
I did
that was
last time
spying.
because now
It meant to represent, like, the
yeah,
father
so
was spying on the
theory,
kid, right?
Alec is an angry teenager who's upset that his younger sister Hazel gets all of their parents' love and affection because she's practically perfect in every way. So when Hazel, just out of the blue, starts being overly nice to Alec and wants to join him in making their parents miserable, he doesn't trust her. He suspects that she's up to something, and so he concocts a plan to expose her for being a spoiled brat at her upcoming birthday party, which happens at, wouldn't you know it, the local Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
Furby
His plan,
Fazbear.
well, it's not a particularly good one, and if I have to fault this story for one thing, it's that the mechanics of how it all works is kind of confusing, so stay with me here. At Freddy's, they have this big money booth. You know, those clear boxes with fans that blow all these tickets around you, and you try to grab them, and you walk away with whatever you're able to capture in the booth. And in the booth, there's a special ticket that allows you to win the top prize in the restaurant, a Yarg Foxy. Basically a large Foxy doll with extra hook-swinging action. Okay, so it seems like Hazel really wants to win the Yarg Foxy. So
Nice,
Alex
I want that too.
sabotages her chances by taking out the special winning ticket before she gets in. Except she does win. By some weird, magical, unexplained miracle, the ticket winds up in her hair and she wins the Foxy doll. The twist, though, is that she didn't want to win it for herself. She wanted to win it for Alec. You see, Alex secretly loves Freddy's Pizzeria, but he never gets to have his birthday there. And of all the characters, he loves Foxy the most, even pretending to be Yarg Foxy around the house when no one's looking. But when Hazel tries to give it to him as a sign of friendship, as a way to try and finally make him happy, all it does is infuriate him. Once more bested by his perfect sister, Alec loses it, he rips the Foxy doll and runs off to the storage room crying. Once there, he meets a lonely Freddy doll, a small, free-roaming version of everyone's favorite bear. The bear hypnotizes him and then body swaps with him, leaving Alec's consciousness trapped forever in the doll's body, while an AI with his face roams free, unbeknownst to his family. So forgive me the detailed plot description, but I needed to get all that in because Alec's story, strangely enough, closely matches what we see happening in Fnaf 4's Crying Child. Now, I don't think Alec is the crying child by any means. There are just way too many differences here, but I did want to call out how similar these two stories are because the parallels seem intentional. They seem to be inviting
But the
us
kid
to
was in
compare
body swap,
these
though.
two
That's the thing.
stories. So let's do exactly that. Just like in Fnaf 4, there's a countdown to a birthday party happening at Freddy's at the end of the week. Though in this case, it's a sister's party and not his. Speaking of the sister, Alec's younger sister Hazel is described as being cute and perfect, with a lot of emphasis being placed on her green eyes and her curly yellow hair. An important physical description considering Elizabeth, the girl who would go on to possess Baby and who we assume is Crying Child's sister and owner of this room in Fnaf 4, is also blonde with green eyes. In fact, eye color is brought up a lot, an unusual amount throughout the Lonely Freddy story. Quotes like this: Alec had never noticed the bear's eyes before. Had they always been that blue? And again, its eyes were as blue and deep as an ocean trench. Over 13 times are eyes in this story qualified by their color,
Silver
which is
eyes,
worth noting
what?
considering that a lot of the other short stories thus far in Fazbear Frights have had themselves pretty sparse character descriptions. But this one, for some reason, really chooses to emphasize the fact that Alec and Hazel have green eyes and that Lonely Freddy has blue eyes, which, if you have an obsessive level of knowledge of the series, should ring a few alarm bells. In Sister Location, eye color was a huge deal, so much so that I did a whole theory about it back when Sister Location came out, where the baby animatronic had blue eyes until she scooped Elizabeth and her
When did we watch
turned
that
green.
one?
And here we have something very similar happening. Quote from the story. Alex
Well, we watched it
stared
for sure, I know.
hard into the blue eyes of Lonely Freddy, eyes that had burned through his soul, and he searched for answers of his own, but he only came away with more questions, because the blue eyes of the bear had suddenly turned a light green. End quote. And again, in this quote, all Alec could see was the bear as its newly green eyes bore through him. So we've got a party, a sister, and some eyes. But obviously there's gotta be more, right? Alec, when his plan fails, runs off to hide in the storage room crying, similar to the crying child being locked in the storage room in Fnaf 4. And in general, Alec is just a sulky, moody kid who, similar to our crying child, both loves and hates Freddy Fazbear's. Alec, in the book, secretly loves the restaurant and its characters, but he also hates it because he only gets to go when it's for his sister, which makes him bitter and angry to be there. It's a lot like the conflicted feelings feelings our crying child has for the restaurants, who clearly likes the franchise. I mean, he has all the toys in his room, and yet while he's there, he's clearly miserable. We're not exactly sure why, but he does have mixed feelings about this franchise. Kind of like me, that is #relatable. I feel seen, crying child. But to me, one of the most telling connections between this story and the game is the Yarg Foxy toy. When Hazel tries to give the toy to Alec, Alec freaks out and rips the toy's arm off. It's a small detail, but one that immediately made me think of the Foxy that's in the crying child's Fnaf 4 room. A Foxy plush with one very specific feature. A feature that has never gotten explained. Its head was pulled off. So we have ourselves two Foxy plushies, both with a body part ripped off in some way, in the possession of a kid who both loves and hates Freddy's, that winds up locked in a storage room crying, attends a birthday party, and has themselves a green-eyed sister with blonde hair. It is just an oddly specific series of parallels that are almost so precise, they're inviting us to compare them. It's actually a bit uncanny. Alec in this story is almost like a fusion of the crying child and his brother. You see, crying child for all the reasons that we just talked about, but also the older brother because, well, he's a mean older brother to his sister, and his favorite character is Foxy, so much so that he pretends to be Foxy around the house, just like we see the older brother doing to torment the crying child in Fnaf 4. Again, it's not exactly the same. There are plenty of differences between these two scenarios, but there are a lot of parallel details, almost like alternate universe versions of roughly the same series of events. So what does any of this have to do with Psychic Friend Fredbear? Well, I believe that all of these parallels with Fnaf 4 are intentional. They're drawing lines between the two stories, inviting us to compare them. And when you do that, it becomes undeniable that Psychic Friend Fredbear is a Lonely Freddy. To understand why, let's start with the book. This is how Lonely Freddy is first described. Quote, "It was a weird name for a toy, but the weirdest parts of it were harder to define. The bear stood stiff, almost at attention. Its eyes stared straight ahead at the stage, but Alec had the strangest feeling that it was still watching him." End quote. So, a small Freddy toy with eyes that watch you as you move around the room. Definitely sounds like what Psychic Friend does as we maneuver our way through the Fnaf 4 minigames. His white eyes just move around with us, wherever we go. We're also told that the Lonely Freddy is able to free roam in order to follow the kids around. Again, explaining why he shows up in practically every screen of the Fnaf 4 minigames. It is literally designed to be a moving surveillance camera. I mean, maybe it can't disguise itself as a flower or whatever, but just chalk that one up to Scott's artistic license. Later in the story, we're told what the purpose of the Lonely Freddy is. Quote again, "At Freddy Fazbear's, we believe that no child should have to experience the wonder and delight of Freddy Fazbear's Family Pizzeria alone. Using patented technology and a touch of that Freddy Fazbear magic, Freddy will learn all about your child's favorite things just like a true friend." Aunt Gigi leaned close to their mom. "Is it just
See,
me,
this is
or
giving me
does
like
Lonely
major
Freddy
Megan
seem like a
vibes.
cure for the unwanted kid? It's a mechanical last resort, as in no one wants to play with this kid, so here's a machine that'll do it instead." End quote. This is a device specifically designed to become a friend to sad and lonely children. Children just like Fnaf 4's crying child. Children just like Alec. And in a line, again drawing parallels between the two stories, we get ourselves this. Quote, "If there was ever a kid who would have been foisted onto a Lonely Freddy at a birthday party, it would have been Alec." Now, this is important. One of the strangest things about Psychic Friend Fredbear in the game was his knowledge of crying child's innermost thoughts, saying things like, "Remember what you saw," and "he hates you."
Remember the
It's
Alamo.
the whole reason I started calling him Psychic Friend Fredbear in the first place. The toy's knowledge of what was going on inside the boy's head was just uncanny. Just one of the many strange things about this character. One of the many strange things about this character that gets an explanation via Lonely Freddy's behavior in the story. The bear approaches Alec in the storage room and starts asking questions. Questions that start to turn serious. Quote from the book, "I've been waiting for you, friend," the bear said. "We should be best friends." "It's a stuffed animal," Alec told himself. "It's a stuffed toy." "What's your favorite color?" "My favorite color is green." "What's your favorite food?" "Lasagna." Then the bear's questions took a different turn. "What would you do if you were asked to hurt someone you love?" It felt like the bear was reaching its soft plush paw into his very soul and extracting the answers he kept the most hidden, and it was doing it so effortlessly. So the Lonely Freddy is a stuffed bear designed to act as a surveillance camera on kids, follow them around, talk to the sad, lonely ones, and then extract information from them to become their friend before eventually body swapping with them. I mean, each and every one of those details, minus the whole body swap thing, is something that we see the psychic friend Fredbear do. But there is one last detail that I haven't included yet. The Freddys are controlled by a man who works in a private backroom office. Quote again, the party prepper turned a dial on her hip-clipped walkie-talkie and pressed her finger to her headset. Someone get Daryl to do a Lonely Freddy demo.
Daryl's on break.
The fact that there's someone behind the scenes controlling these devices in the book is a direct callback to the secret private room from Sister Location. The one where there were surveillance cameras watching the Fnaf 4 house, guarded by the password 1983. It was in that room that we saw a psychic friend Fredbear for the first and only time in a non-8-bit setting. There, on the desk, was a short little plushie with his white little surveillance eyes and a walkie-talkie right next to him, coinciding with this scene from the book. So, there you have it, friends. The official name of psychic friend Fredbear is Lonely Freddy. It's not quite as fun, but I guess it's easier for me to type, so that's a plus. It's a camera system controlled by someone hidden in a back surveillance room. A system that has the ability to walk and talk and maybe even hypnotize and body swap. Now the question that we're left with is, who was controlling it in FNAF 4? I mean, it seems like the obvious answer here should be William Afton, right? Who else would be doing it? But the bigger question is why? Why would he be doing all this just to watch what we assume is his own son? And then over in Bookland, the question is whether all of this is intentional. It seems like the employees don't actually know the true nature of these robots, so is this an AI roaming around, or was a normal Lonely Freddy swapped out for one with body snatching abilities? That one seems like the most likely scenario, considering in story number 3, out of stock, the plush trap chaser is swapped with an evil one with human body parts. So maybe William Afton, or some of his people in this book universe, are slowly seeding out evil animatronics into the world to run as little test cases. Also, since I'm wrapping up my discussion of Fetch here, something else for you to chew on. At Hazel's birthday party, there's a girl named Charlotte. A girl who shares a name with the child that we know goes on to possess the puppet. A girl who, in this story, is allergic to chocolate and accidentally eats some and then spends the rest of the party vomiting. Could this actually give us an explanation for why Charlotte in the games would end up outside of the party, outside of the restaurant, when we see her in FNAF 6, before she eventually gets killed and turned into a puppet? It may be. It's just a thought that I'm throwing out there into the universe for everyone to pick apart. But with Fetch out of the way, it's time to look ahead. Because based on the descriptions, it's books number 4 and 5, coming out later this year, that seem like they may hold the biggest lore reveals yet. In book 4's description, we see that one of the main characters will have the name Susie. If she also has herself a dog, Susie is almost guaranteed to be confirmed as our Fruity Maze girl, and our first ever victim, the one who goes on to possess Chica. We also know that one of the book 4 stories will be about Pete and his younger brother who, quote, get in a fight in the wake of their parents' divorce and fall prey to a gruesome curse. Two brothers with divorced parents that have some blood curse on their family? Seems like it could be another stand-in for our crying child and Foxy bro getting wrapped up in the cycle of serial killing their father started decades prior. And then, flipping over to book number 5's description, quote, in room 1280 of Heracles Hospital, something evil is keeping a man alive. A man with gruesome burns all over his body and an iron will to live. Sounds a lot like our good old buddy William. Or it could be the aftermath of the FNAF 6's restaurant burning. With that being the last book in the Fazbear Fright series, I would expect that one to tie up a lot of different loose ends. Speaking of loose ends, by the way, I hate them. That is why this show exists, to get rid of narrative loose ends, to tie them up, put them neatly and organized back on the shelf. So you know what I really appreciate? What doesn't have loose ends? Wireless earbuds. No wires means no obnoxious tangling,
Okay.
which in turn means
BRB. One second.
Let me come home with you. Is there room for one more? Can I come home with you? Let me come home with you. Can I come home with you? Bring me home. Bring me home. There's room for one more.
hello internet, welcome to Book Theory. Because if you have one moderately popular indie Smash game in your franchise, chances are you also have yourself a 10 installment book deal. That's barely an exaggeration. Bendy and the Ink Machine, 3, with more promised on the way. Hello Neighbor, 6. Heck, it's a surprise that Baldi's Basics doesn't have an entire trilogy dedicated to the horrific backstory of the Jump Rope Girl.
That makes me sad.
No joke, at this point in my life, I'm reading more video games than I'm playing. But of course today, we're not talking about any of those other franchises. We're talking about the Grandpappy, the one that paved the way for all those who would dare to follow in its footsteps. Five Nights at Freddy's and its 8 books, as well as its 2 graphic novel reimaginings of the first 2 books. But here's the best part here, friends. True to this franchise, the books were supposed to end at Fazbear Frights number 5. We're currently at Fazbear Frights number 3. The end was in sight. That was gonna be it. That was the end of the line. Mystery over. But oh no, my friends, of course not. Now, there are 2 more final installments announced, just like every game after Fnaf 3. I used to joke that the fan was the scariest part of this franchise. Oh no, not anymore, dear theorists. Now, it's multi-platform merchandising. So Fazbear Frights number 3, titled 1:35 a.m., just came out, and whoo boy, there is a lot to talk about with this one. If you'll remember, Scott has made it pretty darn clear that this new book series is meant to help us solve the mysteries from the past, and that the stories are, as they say in every book's official description, pulled from all different corners of the FNAF lore. But unlike the past 2 Fazbear Frights books, where the connections have been a bit looser, I suppose is the best way to describe a time-traveling ball pit that leads to a scene of some 1985 pizzeria murders, the stories contained in this one, in 1:35 a.m., all feel very strongly connected to, well, like I just said, every corner of the FNAF canon. The stories here are starting to show how they're connected to not only each other, but also how they're connected to the original book trilogy, and yes, how they're even connected to the games, creating this elaborate web of complicated animatronic death. But more than anything else, these books are starting to confirm things for us. Theories and suspicions that we've had for the better part of the last 5 years, which, you know, is kinda nice to receive some level of validation. Like I said, it is a lot to cover, and so I'm gonna cover this one like I've covered the last 2 books. Today's episode is gonna be dedicated to a general overview of the stories, spotlighting some of the most important details for theory crafting, and explaining what I think this new batch of stories is trying to tell us about the series' mysteries. And then the next video, we're gonna be doing a deep dive into probably the biggest mystery of all 3 books so far, FNAF's newest killer animatronic, the Stitch Wraith. This guy is actually really interesting, and his story is starting to weave through most of the 9 other small stories that we've covered in these other books, and what he means might actually have some severe implications for not just the original trilogy of novels, but also the future of the games. Like I said, more on that next week, but for today, let's start with our title story, 1:35 a.m. This one is pretty straightforward. Delilah is a young woman with a tragic backstory. Her parents both died when she was 11, at which point she was bounced around and abused, sadly, in the foster care system for years. Eventually, she finds a stable home and happiness with a man named Richard. They get married, and Delilah excitedly looks forward to finally having a child of her own so she can finally complete the family that she never had. Everything is going great in her life until Richard divorces her. Now she's alone and sadder than ever. And then she dies, trapped in a ventilation shaft after being tortured by the embodiment of the child that she never had. Children's entertainment, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so I may have skipped a few steps there, but it's roughly the idea. One day, Delilah finds an animatronic doll named Ella at a garage sale. A doll that reminds her of the child that she always dreamed of having. Quote, with brown curly hair, big dark eyes, and plump pink cheeks, the doll looked almost exactly like the baby Delilah had envisioned having someday with Richard. She'd been sure that she was going to be a mother, so sure that she'd named the baby before the baby was even conceived. Her name would be Emma. Delilah reached for the tag that hung on the doll's wrist. My name is Ella. Ella. So close to Emma. Delilah felt an odd tingle slither through her body, end quote. She buys the doll, in part because it reminds her of her almost never child, and because it has a built-in alarm clock. Emotionally scarring with a side of functionality, just the way I like it. Anyway, she sets the alarm inside of Ella for 1:35 p.m. to help wake her up for her shift at work, but the alarm doesn't go off. And just like that, Delilah gets her first taste of parental disappointment. So she does what any good parent would do in that situation, immediately hurls her would-be child into the nearest dumpster. Yikes, Delilah. Maybe it's better that you and Richard didn't have that kid after all. Anyway, that night she's awoken at 1:35 a.m. by Ella. Delilah assumes that she accidentally set the alarm for AM rather than PM, which reminds me of the time I didn't bother to set the clock right on my Tamagotchi and was forced to scoop his poop every day at 4 in the morning. I can't imagine why he died. Certainly not my fault. Anyway, she tries to find the trashed Ella doll, but can't. And from that point forward is slowly driven insane by the doll waking her up every morning at 1:35. I mean, 1:35 is still early enough at night to get a decent night's sleep. It's not a 3 a.m. challenge or anything like that, but whatever. Yeah, knowing that she'll never feel safe again, she climbs into a ventilation shaft in a building under construction and dies. Quote from the book, "She'd never wanted things, she wanted love." Oof, it is a heartbreaker. Man, the stories in these books so far have been pretty sad, but this one is just tragic. In fact, all 3 stories from this particular book are just rough. Now, this story has 2 really important details in it. Details that seem to make Delilah's horrific struggle a strange nexus point for both the original book canon as well as the games. So let's start with the books first. In 1:35 AM, the Ella doll is described as a, quote, helper doll manufactured by Fazbear Entertainment. Continuing forward with that quote, the booklet had a list of what Ella was designed for. She could keep time and serve as an alarm clock, manage appointments, keep track of lists, take photos, read stories, sing songs, and even serve drinks. Serve drinks? Delilah shook her head. Now, in the games, we never really get to learn much about Henry, the creator of the animatronics. But in the novel trilogy, Silver Eyes, Twisted Ones, and Fourth Closet, we get to meet not only his daughter Charlie, but also some of his other creations, including, wouldn't you know it, a doll named Ella, who is built to serve tea. From the Silver Eyes novel, quote, "Outsailed Ella on her track, a child-sized doll bearing a teacup and saucer in her tiny hands like an offering," end quote. Now, across all 3 novels, we never get a solid physical description of the Ella doll, but in another book, The Freddy Files, which collects all the main information about the franchise, we do get to see our first illustration of the doll, and wouldn't you know it, everything matches the description of Delilah's little garage sale find from 1:35 AM. Quote again, "Wearing a puffy-sleeved 1980s-era bright blue full-skirted dress with pink ruffled trim and a big bow around the waist," end quote. It's the same doll, meaning that this first story is happening in the novel timeline after the events of Fourth Closet. Somehow, this is the doll that Henry created for his daughter Charlie, who, I need to technically remind you, is his daughter, because again, remember, his daughter died at a young age, and he replaced her with a series of 4 robots that represent Charlie growing up at various ages, so Ella technically is an early version of his own daughter. Figured I'd throw that little factoid in there since, this is a real and totally valid plot point from the novelized series of events in this very easy-to-understand series. But that's not all. While I was reading this story, the way Delilah decides to hide in the ventilation shaft felt really strange to me. Like, why? It was super random, but also was one of those things that felt so oddly specific that it felt like it had to have had a bigger purpose. So I dug around and found this for you. For your consideration, I present to you Night 2 of Sister Location.
So, funny story. A dead body was found in this vent once. Okay, so not that funny, but it's a story.
So, could Delilah be that body that was actually found in the vents of Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals? Maybe, but probably more likely it's alluding to that story from Sister Location rather than directly the same one. You see, in the book, we're told that Delilah's vent is in a site that's under construction, a 3-story structure that feels a bit like an office building. Sister Location, meanwhile, takes place in an underground facility underneath a residential home, so it's probably not the same building. At the same time, though, the story makes it clear that Delilah was drawn to this place. Quote, "The answer to her plight was in here. She was sure of it. Someplace here she was gonna find a way to escape Ella forever," end quote. Time and again throughout all of these Fazbear Fright stories, we're shown people being
Lomon, appreciate you following, bro. Hell yeah. Thank you, bro.
Force. So could Delilah
let me get some.
Sister Location
get this
have
done.
been compelled to come there, and this story is just giving us a hint as to how that happened. Maybe. And whereas the Delilah Sister Location connection might just be me reading too far into things, that certainly isn't true for our second story,
Nice.
Room for One More. In this story, and stop
How you guys
if
doing?
any of this sounds familiar,
Appreciate you.
Stanley is a
Lamont.
night guard at a mysterious
555 for
underground facility
following me.
little
Really appreciate it.
ballerina
Hell yeah.
dolls looking to escape to the surface. Ding, ding, ding! It's like in one sentence we just won Fnaf bingo. Each night he falls asleep on the job, wakes up to find a mini Rena doll on the desk asking to go home with him. Stanley Stanley falls asleep again, and when he wakes up, the doll is magically gone. Over the next few days, his arms start to swell, his throat starts to bleed, and yet he keeps going to work, keeps finding dolls, and keeps falling asleep. Eventually, he learns that the dolls have been crawling into his mouth while he sleeps, causing his body to swell to the point of bursting. The end. The moral of this story, kiddos, be a good employee. Don't sleep on the job. Otherwise, little animatronic creatures are gonna crawl into you and make you explode from the inside out. What's also interesting about this story is Stanley's dreams.
That's really weird that I just came back to this right now.
Strange dream. In the first, Funtime Foxy is a cab driver. In the second, the facility's power cuts off and he comes face to face with Funtime Freddy. And in the last one, Ennard is a dentist and Ballora is his dental assistant, which I would say is one of the strangest things to ever appear in this franchise. But then again, I turn your attention to this corner where we have time-traveling ball pit, anime Foxy, Yandere Chica. Anyway, this one is pretty obvious, right? Stanley is working at Circus Baby's
Yandere.
underground facility from Sister.
Why does he pronounce them so weird for bro? I guess probably like the first time that he's heard of those phrases before, so you know.
Skin suit in that game's secret ending. I think this story might be trying to give us a more realistic interpretation of those events, or something that more closely matches what we see happening in those ending cutscenes. That instead of Michael being scooped and having his skeleton removed and all of that at the same time, that our protagonist Michael instead is being slowly filled up with animatronic pieces night after night, giving him that progressively sickly look that scares all the people around him. Stanley's story even mentions this, quote, "He staggered and stumbled down the sidewalk. Passers-by stared, some seeming worried, others just annoyed, like it inconvenienced them to see another person suffering," which feels right on point with how those cutscenes were depicted in Sister Location. But okay, of the 3 stories in 1:35 a.m., it's story number 3, New Kid, that's the most exciting to talk about, at least for today's episode, because this one gets to the heart of what is still to this day the single biggest question of the series, and that is the identity of Golden Freddy. Let me tell you, I thought we had this one pretty well nailed down, that it was Cassidy, aka the vengeful spirit from Ultimate Custom Night, and yet this story, well, it causes me to question a few things about our conclusions. First, let's go through a quick summary. Devin is a 9th grade social loner alongside his only friend Mick. One day, a new kid in school named Kelsey shows interest in spending time with the two of them. Kelsey is good looking, he's charismatic, he immediately attracts the attention of all the cool kids in school. And even though Kelsey, Devin, and Mick all get along as friends, eventually Devin gets jealous of Kelsey, because Kelsey has everything that Devin wants. And so to get some revenge, he lures him to an abandoned Freddy's restaurant long forgotten at the outskirts of the town. His plan is to trap Kelsey in a spring-lock suit for a few hours to scare him, but, well, you know what's gonna happen. The sheer mention of spring-lock suit immediately gives you a spoiler alert as to what's gonna go down. Kelsey puts on the Golden Freddy suit and gets skewered alive. Quote, "The blood saturated the bear's matted fur in seconds and began pooling on the floor. Devin stared at the moving blood. It looked like it was a living thing. A thinking red liquid lake stretching out." End quote. Mick and Devin leave Kelsey for dead for fear of Devin getting in trouble, but they're not quite sure he actually died. Nearly a week later, Devin is convinced to go back and check on Kelsey, but when he does, he's in for a surprise. Kelsey has vanished. Devin eventually sticks his hand inside the suit's mouth to feel around for Kelsey's slumped-over dead body, only for the spring locks to fail again and crush his arm. As Devin lies on the floor, trapped and slowly bleeding to death, he gets a final glimpse into the suit and, well, let's just say what he sees inside rocks the foundation of what we know about this franchise. Quote, "Devin wiggled in one more attempt to free himself. The mouth opened even more, and Devin got a sudden glimpse inside the suit. He gasped. Down low, past his arm, Devin could see a body, a dead body, just like he thought he'd find when he came back here to check. But it wasn't exactly like he thought he'd find. This one had curly black hair. The body in the suit wasn't Kelsey. Now, there's a lot of weird things about this story that I don't quite have answers for.
That just means, like,
some thoughts about.
Kelsey's body just, like,
the ending. You see, the book doesn't
like,
end with Devin's
got-
death like you would expect.
I'm losing my words right now. That just means Kelsey's body was broken down already and then digested, right? So now it's a new kid in there. Problem solved.
At a first reading, like this should be a flashback to when Kelsey first meets Mick and Devin at school. Like, oh, this was the fateful meeting that would eventually lead to multiple of their deaths. But it's not. This is Kelsey at a new school meeting two new boys. In the story, Mick meets Kelsey first and then brings Kelsey over to meet Devin, and it all takes place in a classroom. This closing scene, meanwhile, is outside the front doors of a school, and the two boys Kelsey introduced himself to are less social outcasts like Mick and Devin, and more like bullies. We're expressly told that the boys are snickering at the passing kids. Even Kelsey's first line to them is different. It implies that Kelsey has somehow lived on after his supposed Springtrap death in Golden Freddy, and now he's the new kid at yet another new school, introducing himself to two new kids.
He's a robot.
And the way that this final scene is written, with Kelsey scoping out the two boys from afar before he approaches them, it feels like he's actively targeting loner kids to make friends with. Could this be Kelsey's attempt to befriend kids that most overlook and then lure them back to a Freddy's Pizzeria for some tragic incident to happen? It seems like it would be a stretch, but let's talk about Kelsey himself. Mr. Perfect. Kelsey is a weird entity in all this. Throughout the story, there are moments when his behavior is specifically called out as slightly off. Quote from the book, Kelsey tilted his head and studied Devin for a couple of seconds. For those 2 seconds, Devin had the weird feeling he was being evaluated. And again later, Devin was tempted to stab Kelsey to see if he was a robot. Kids don't say stuff like that. Once they're actually at the pizzeria, things
I
go
knew it, he was a robot.
surprisingly smoothly for Devin's plan. The line in the book even goes like this, quote, this was going even better than he imagined. He thought he was gonna have to talk Kelsey into trying on the Golden Freddy suit, but it looked like he was gonna do it all on his own. It was like it was meant to be. All of it seems to cast some level of suspicion on Kelsey's true motivations, and that's without me even mentioning the fact that his body just goes missing at the end of the book when it has been skewered and bled to death. To me, it feels like Kelsey may just be our
It was an
vengeful spirit
inside job.
custom night. In the story, Kelsey is described as having wavy blonde hair and blue eyes. Now, we have a pretty solid idea that its hair is straight, with a slight wave, and it appears to be blonde. But here's the kicker. This image was created by inverting colors. It's what gives it that blown out and kind of creepy appearance. If you invert the colors of the vengeful spirit's eyes, you get blue, just like Kelsey is described in the book.
But is it blue?
The idea of a vengeful spirit, a kid who is angry about his own death, perhaps in an accident like we see in Fnaf 4, or in this particular story, looking to get revenge on other kids who are similar to his original killers. He goes from school to school, presumably ones near Fazbear locations, to somehow trick kids into getting killed by the suit. The parallels with Vengeful Spirit even go to the moments right around Kelsey's death in the book. This is how it's described, and the sound wasn't the bad part. It was bad, yes, but the bad part, the really bad part, was the way the suit started jerking in a spastic, horrific dance. It looked like the moth-eaten, mildew-blotched gold bear was convulsing, but it wasn't the bear, it was Kelsey. It's remarkably similar to the final cutscene from Ultimate Custom Night, where we see again an angry Golden Freddy, presumably filled with the vengeful spirit, twitching off into the darkness. Also worth noting is that the spring-lock suits are apparently big enough for kids to slump down into the body. Devin, when he initially can't find Kelsey's body inside the suit, decides to dig deeper down into it. Quote, had Kelsey somehow slid down into the suit? Was that his hair that Devin could see? This, to me, confirms what we see in Fnaf 4's storage room cutscene, the strange tuft of hair that's coming out of the body of the suit. Back then, we weren't sure what this was trying to tell us, what that tuft of hair was meant to be. But now, I think we can safely conclude that it is indeed a child stuffed into that body, and that we're only seeing the top tuft of hair poking out. It would seem to imply that there was a victim before the bite of 1983, and that the crying child was somehow aware of at least one, if not multiple, of past victims shoved inside.
I thought we all knew that,
But all
basically.
of this brings us to the obvious question of this story. The curly black hair at the bottom of the suit. Who's that? And honestly, I'm not sure. Cassidy, which is what we've been assuming to be Golden Freddy's name this entire time, does indeed have black hair, but it's always been described as long and straight. In the fourth closet, we physically see Cassidy, and she's described as this, quote, that's Cassidy, a girl with long black hair approached. And in the survival logbook, where we first learned of Cassidy's name, there's this girl who, again, has long, black, straight hair. And that's something worth pointing out, for as chaotic as the story in this franchise has been for all its iterations, names and hairstyles and colors of the victims seem to be fairly consistent. Susie is always associated with her dog. She has blonde hair with curls and blue eyes. Cassidy always appears to have straight black hair. Fritz always has freckles. The names and the faces of the surrounding characters may change, but the missing children all seem to be fairly consistent in both name and physical description, which is an important detail to keep track of moving forward. So could all of this mean that Vengeful Spirit and Cassidy are two separate entities? That two spirits might both be in possession of Golden Freddy, or that Cassidy isn't really associated with Golden Freddy at all, and is instead the identity of one of the other animatronics. Because in Fourth Closet, she technically wasn't the one who was associated with Golden Freddy. Honestly, I don't know. I need to actually review the evidence for this one, and I encourage you to do the same. The last thing worth mentioning for all of us to chew on is the mysterious slithering that's heard throughout this story. While the boys are exploring the abandoned pizzeria, they hear something inexplicable in the walls. Quote, while they were in the bathroom, Devin was pretty sure he heard something slithering through the walls. He didn't say anything. From the way the other boys' faces paled, he knew they heard it too. They didn't mention it either. It's never mentioned again. Nothing ever comes of this strange little detail, but it's clearly important because more inexplicable, strange sounds come from the Freddy torso after Kelsey dies. In a later quote, "Did you leave anything else?" He tried to ignore the fact that the scuttling sound was coming from the bear suit. Now, this is after Kelsey has already stopped squirming and twitching. So again, we're left with some mysterious force moving around in the pizzeria creating these sorts of sounds. Is it Ennard? Is it the Stitch Wraith? Is it something else? Like I said, lots to chew on with this particular book, but as you can tell, it's given us pretty explicit information about some of the biggest questions that this series has had. Now it's up to us, as always, to put all those pieces together. And there certainly are a lot of pieces that'll start coming together next time as we start looking into the power of agony and the twisted timeline of FNAF's next newest murderer, the Stitch Wraith. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to get notified of when that video comes out next week. And in the meantime,
Next week?
do me a favor.
What?
Remember, it's just a theory. A game.
Okay, theory. Thanks for watching.
It's alive. It's alive. It's a... Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, where today we're covering the scariest topic in all of FNAF lore, the timeline. But not for the games. Oh, geez, no, I hate myself, but not that much. Whew, I'll probably have to do that at some point down the line, but not today. No, what we're covering today is a different timeline. You see, there's a new monster afoot in the FNAF universe, a killer that has horrifically taken the lives of nearly a dozen people. A killer as yet unseen in the games, but one who will, after today's theory, provide us with key insights into how this whole FNAF universe works, the true nature of Remnant, and how ghosts can possess endoskeletons. As I said, he hasn't been in a game yet, but I have a feeling he'll be showing up soon, maybe as soon as the new game's security breach. But in order to know for sure, it's our job to track his movements, to understand what his goals are, and where he's headed to next. You see, last FNAF theory, we did a surface level analysis of 1:35 a.m., the latest installment of the Fazbear Fright series, and boy was that one a biggie, with huge revelations about sister location, ultimate custom nights, vengeful spirit, and the real identity, or should I say identities, of Golden Freddy. And looking back, since the Fazbear Frights books became a thing, I've done 5 theories on them, covering the many, many connections that they have to the various facets of FNAF lore, from new strings of murders happening in 1985 to the true identity of psychic friend Fredbear. But despite all of this new FNAF talk, there's been one element I've largely been glossing over, the Stitch Wraith. In the event that you haven't picked up any of the installments of the book series yet, let me catch you up. Each new book contains 3 short stories. stories, right? That's the selling feature. It's what's advertised on the back of the box, so to speak. But each one also comes with a bit of a bonus. In reality, each book is more like 3 1/5 stories. You see, each one ends with an epilogue, our little MCU post-credits teaser giving us a piece of yet another story. The tale of the Stitch Wraith, a story that appears to be spanning out across the ending of each and every book in this new series. And that alone would be pretty darn cool, right? Also, it's a brilliant marketing tactic to keep us buying more just to see the end of this thing. Slow clap, Scott Coffin. Slow clap. But 3 segments in, and it's becoming clear that the tale of the Stitch Wraith isn't just another horror tale. It's instead a running thread throughout nearly every other shorter story that we've been reading through, which in turn seems to connect it both to the original trilogy of books as well as even the games. So in order to understand what this thing is and where the lore is headed, it's time to go Easter egg hunting for a monster. Now, admittedly, my first theory on the Fazbear Frights books briefly covered the Stitch Wraith, and back then I assumed he was Ennard. The Wraith was described in that book as a mysterious figure wearing a black cloak and wearing a white mask with features drawn in thick black marker. The description specifically calls out his 2 eyes, one of which appears to be blacked out, a big toothy grin with blood around the mouth, and a limping or shambling walk. White mask, blacked out eye, shamble, shake. It seems like a slam dunk for Ennard. However, the epilogue for 1:35 a.m. threw that hypothesis out the window as it revealed just exactly how the Stitch Wraith was brought to life. A process that actually reveals a lot about how this series' mythos works. In this epilogue, we're introduced to Dr. Phineas Taggart, not to be confused with his friend Dr. Ferb Fletcher. Phineas is a bit of a mad scientist type, studying the untapped power of human emotion. As he says himself, quote, "Human emotion is slower to impact, more insidious. It emanates from us, or is excreted from us like sweat or tears, and it wafts outward like a noxious cloud soaking into the surroundings." In particular, his research is centered around the intense emotion of agony. In order to study it, we see that Phineas collects hundreds of haunted objects to search for this emotion trapped inside. Again, from the book, the word haunted could mean showing signs of torment or some kind of mental anguish. These items on Phineas's shelves weren't possessed by ghosts. The ones that were truly haunted were energized by agony. Agony, I'm convinced, radiates farther from people than any other emotion, Phineas said. My work is focused on my hypothesis that you can take a saturation of agony, add any sort of intelligence, even an artificial one, and they'll combine together to transmute the energy of emotion into the energy of physical action. This, I believe, is what explains what people call haunted objects. And already you might be starting to see how this all ties into what we already know about this franchise. In FNAF 6's Insanity ending, we were introduced to the blueprints outlining how the sister location Scooper worked, and it was, well, it was not what we expected, to say the least. Through those blueprints, we learned about the mystery metal called Remnant, and its ability to supposedly give life to objects that it touches. The novel The Fourth Closet took it one step further and showed us the Remnant metal being created and used. In that story, we watch as William Afton melts down pieces of the old animatronics, creating a remnant soup that he then uses to give life to new living robots, specifically the Funtime animatronics. Quote, "On the heating table rested the endoskeletons of the original Freddy's animatronics, welded and melted together, immobile and featureless, and still inhabited by the spirits of the children who had been murdered inside of them so many years ago, still filled with life and motion and thought, all trapped, all in terrible pain." Usually this goes into something mechanical, something I made, William said. If we remember back to Candy Cadet's stories of 5 things always becoming one thing, 5 kittens getting sewn together, or 5 keys melted down into one, this is exactly what those stories were referring to. But Phineas's experiments in 1:35 a.m. actually take it one step further and give us more insight into the true nature of Remnant. Things that are brought to life via Remnant aren't necessarily infused with a soul, but instead with agony, with intense human emotion, with extreme human suffering. This is important because it means that characters like Balloon Boy, the Bitty Babs and the Mini Renas and Sister Location, heck, even animatronics like Mangle, don't necessarily need to have actual victims associated with them. We used to look at solving the mysteries of this series as having it be one-to-one all the time. Susie equals Chica, Charlie equals the puppet, Cassidy equals Golden Freddy. But what we're starting to learn is that there are other ways to bring things to life in this series, that some animatronics may contain multiple souls, like we talked about last time with Golden Freddy, and some might not contain any souls at all, as long as it always ties back to some extreme tragedy filled with this all-powerful emotion of agony. So with that little analysis in place, let's go back to our story. We see Phineas collect objects associated with horrific tragedies, and via some means funnel all the agony from them down into an endoskeleton, which we're specifically told is meant to be a stand-in for bones, so we're talking like a Fnaf 1 or Fnaf 2 era endoskeleton here. Phineas then puts the head of a large 3-foot doll on it, a doll whose description bears a shocking similarity to Blank, actually, from the fan game Five Nights at Candy's, and finally a battery pack before turning this beast on. And not only does this modern Frankenstein come to life, it immediately kills its creator, Phineas, seemingly by accident, surprisingly, and then runs off, hiding under a black cloak. The Stitch Wraith has been born. But okay, why am I making such a big deal out of this thing? Why does this guy deserve his own episode? Well, because solving the Stitch Wraith story in these books is like a game unto itself. You see, there have been very subtle clues hidden throughout the 9 other stories in this series that connect things back to the Stitch Wraith. My first clue was the battery pack Phineas uses to power the Stitch Wraith as he's building it, because it's not just any battery pack. It came from Fetch, the murder animatronic dog from book 2 of the series. Quote, "The item in the second box was an animatronic dog that clearly no longer functioned. The dog was an ugly dog, with a triangle-shaped head and a wide mouth full of sharp teeth. In minutes, he'd revealed the dog's battery pack." So immediately we know that the Stitch Wraith story is happening after the events of the Fetch story from book number 2. So I dug around deeper and more connections kept coming. Earlier in this same book, in the title story 1:35 a.m. about the haunted Ella doll, there's one line referencing a man named Phineas looking online for a particular toy. Quote again, "One of the searches for special Ella doll led her to an online ad posted by a user named Phineas who was trying to find one of the dolls. His ad referenced the special Ella doll and said he was willing to pay a premium for the doll's energy." Overall, across the 9 stories published so far, 7 seem to tie back to the Stitch Wraith, allowing us to create a rough timeline of events. So bear with me as we go through this. We know that 1:35 a.m. and Fetch must come first because Phineas is alive and looking for the Ella doll like I just mentioned, and the evil robot dog has just started his murder spree. From there comes the story we just covered, Epilogue 3 and the Stitch Wraith's creation. After that, he begins to roam the city collecting body parts for some purpose. You may remember book number 1 story to be Beautiful, in which Baby hacks apart a human girl named Sarah in order to steal her identity. Sarah is rebuilt out of junk only for her to fall to pieces at the end. Well, in epilogue number 1, we hear that the Stitch Wraith was seen collecting those junk pieces of Sarah. Odd, right? And it's not the only time that it happens either. In book number 2, there's the story Out of Stock about a group of friends who steal a defective plush trap doll, one with oddly human-like eyes and teeth, only for it to go on a rampage. The boys manage to escape by luring it in front of an oncoming train where it gets shattered to pieces. And again, in epilogue number 2, we see the Stitch Wraith on the scene salvaging whatever he can find of the broken bot. And that's where it would seem to end if it weren't for one other small detail. You see, in one of the other stories in this book, Room for One More, about a security guard being force-fed mini Rena dolls in the basement of Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals, there's a passing reference to a restaurant called the Snack Space. "Hey man, I was picking up a takeout order at Luigi's the other night and saw your ex on a date with the manager of the Snack Space." Seems super unimportant.
Why is
right? Would be
Why is it in Vietnamese only, bruh? You see that?
if this was the only time that it was mentioned, but it's popped up in one of the other stories. In Into the Pit, the very first story, the one about the time-traveling ball pit, the snack space is where the protagonist's father works, which means that Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals sister location is also in that world, which in turn connects it to one final story, Count the Ways, where we see an old, broken Funtime Freddy planning to execute a girl trapped inside of his stomach. And while these aren't necessarily directly tied to the Stitch Wraith, it certainly feels like at some point all of these stories will come together, as though we're working on chunks of a larger puzzle. We've got a big chunk over here that's the Stitch Wraith connections, and a big chunk over here that's all connected through Sister Location and the Snack Space, and then you have a few other random pieces over here, and by the end I expect all of them will come together. So assuming that they are all connected, the timeline seems to go about like this. Lonely Freddy, the story about the kids getting mind swapped with mini Freddy dolls, has to be first, because it's the only one of these stories so far where Fazbear Locations are open and ready for business. At some point, Freddy Fazbear's closes, leading to Room for One More about the underground facility filled with mini Renas hoping to escape, which would parallel what we hear in Sister Location.
Due to the massive success, and even more so the unfortunate closing of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, it was clear that the stage was set, no pun intended, for another contender in children's entertainment.
At some point, Baby and the mini Renas escape from that underground facility, leading to 1:35 a.m. with Phineas looking for the haunted doll and Greg activating the murder dog in an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's in Fetch. From there, the next major moment is Stitch Wraith's creation in Epilogue 3, which then leads to his quest for body parts in To Be Beautiful Epilogue 1 and Out of Stock Epilogue 2. We also know that Into the Pit and The New Kid happen near the end of the timeline, since they both feature a closed down, forgotten, or repurposed Freddy's building. Also, there's Count the Ways, which is towards the end of this timeline, grouped with these other stories, since a retired Funtime Freddy is just randomly sitting in a garage killing kids. What does all of this tell us? What was the purpose of doing all this work? Well, first, all of this seems to connect us pretty solidly into the book trilogy. The fact that we have an Ella doll infused with agony that Phineas wants his hands on perfectly matches the Ella doll that Henry made for his daughter Charlie. To quote from the fourth closet, agony erupted, flooding the room with its sound. A man lay curled on the floor, something cradled tightly in his arms, and when his mouth opened, the room shook with the sound of his anguish. Who is that? Charlie said anxiously. What is he holding? You don't recognize her? Elizabeth said. That's Ella, of course. It's all your father had left after you were taken. He cried over that cheap store-bought rag doll for 2 months, cried into it, bled into it, poured his grief over it, end quote. At which point, he makes the robotic Ella doll that we talked about in the last episode. So what we're seeing in these stories appears to be, at least to some extent, the aftermath of that trilogy of books. Which also means that we might already know the true identity of the Stitch Wraith. It's a bit of a long shot, but it's my personal headcanon until proven otherwise. I think that the endoskeleton that powers the Stitch Wraith, the main body that's become the conduit for all of this agony, is the same endoskeleton that killed Henry. The robot that he used to end his own life. The stabbing robot, which, let's be honest, is like the most complicated way to do that sort of thing. Like, build a robot to stab you to death? What? Creative types, man, they are weird. Anyway, we're told in the Silver Eyes that it's a basic Gen 1 endoskeleton with an unfinished face, which would explain exactly why Phineas needs to put a head on it. Quote from the Silver Eyes, she could see its face, if it could be called a face. Its features were scarcely formed, crude and shapeless. Its blind eyes were only raised bumps like the eyes of a statue, seeing nothing but its own grief. We also know that this endoskeleton would be absolutely filled to the brim with agony. I mean, as far as endoskeletons go, a murder bot built by a grieving father is a pretty huge deal. And it's apparently an important enough character to this franchise to have also appeared at the end of the book trilogy. When Charlie is being attacked by Baby, it's this same murder bot and its trusty knife that Charlie uses to do them both in. I have a very, very strong theorist instinct that the Stitch Wraith will, at some point during this book series, be revealed to be connected back to Henry and his bizarre death. Just saying, the pieces are in place for us. Oh yeah, and assuming that the Fazbear Fright series is connected a bit closer to the book trilogy, like it appears to be, we know that Book 5, Bunny Call, features a story about a man with gruesome burns over his body and an iron will to live. I mean, we already suspected that that was William Afton, but going back to see how his story ended in the fourth closet, we see that his death is far from certain. In his final moments, his hospital gown catches fire and he's pulled into a massive furnace. But then, nothing. No official confirmation that that burning actually kills him. Therefore, a burned man in a hospital who refuses to die sounds like a certain yellow bunny we all know who always comes back. And with that, I've had enough Fnaf for now. Oh man, it has been a lot. The new book comes out in early July, so at the very least I get a break for a couple of weeks. Thank goodness. No. on edge these days. 2020 has really started to mess with my head. I need to relax. But I've seen all of this, literally everything on every streaming platform. If only there was something new to watch.
Okay, thank you.
You can be a pirate, but first you'll have to lose an eye and an arm. You can be a pirate. To lose an eye and an arm. First, to lose an eye and an arm. Lose an eye. Lose an eye. Lose an eye. Lose an eye. And an arm.
Hello, Internet!
Welcome to Game Theory.
The show that is, without exaggeration, thinking of reaching out to Scott Cawthon so that we can jointly buy Chuck E. Cheese's quickly dying restaurant franchise so we can transform them into what they were always meant to be, real-world Fnaf experiences. Heck, they've already got the terrible pizza taken care of. We could probably even sell the idea to YouTube Originals and make a whole series about transforming the pizzerias into horror-themed dining experiences, which would also help mitigate the costs of doing all that. No joking here, Scott. This is something we absolutely can and probably should do. I've recreated your games before in real life, and they seem to be pretty well received. So, between my feeder background and your, well, you know, your gobs of money and masterminding of the IP, I think we can make something that's really cool. And yeah, the reason I'm bringing it up here is so fans can start talking about the idea both here and on Reddit to show you how excited they are for this to happen. Anyway, let me just leave it at, you have my email. I eagerly await your response. Who knows, you've probably already bought it at this point. You're just waiting to reveal that fact to the world. Speaking of Chuck E. Cheese restaurants, the grandpappy of FNAF, I actually have a theory in the works about those pizzerias that any FNAF fan will enjoy. The episode will be going live in the next few weeks on my newest theory channel, Food Theory, which, if you haven't checked out yet, you totally should. Link is down in the description. Yes, it sounds like a joke. No, it's not. We've not only got episodes about Chuck E. Cheese on the way, but also horror episodes like how the ghost of KFC's Colonel Sanders has been cursing people for decades. Yes, it is a real thing that we are currently researching. It's the same science, math, and over-research that we do over here, except, you know, on real-life topics. And for anyone who's hesitant to check out a channel about food, we're already winning people over. Like Jack here over on Twitter, who said he started out skeptical, but watched the episodes and immediately got the concept. We've got over 500,000 subscribers in the first 24 hours, and we're getting really close to that million in these first 2 weeks. So please help us reach that milestone in record time. Show the world how passionate we theorists are by shattering that subscriber record. And hey, FNAF even already has made an appearance on the show. It's in every single intro of Food Theory. So subscribe to Food Theory today to get your daily dose of brain food. In a sucky, no good, awful year, seeing so many people excited about this new channel has really helped us all out. So thank you guys for your support. Thank you for your subscription, and I can't wait to deliver you more. It's been a lot of work, but it's really fun. All right, a new month, a new FNAF book, a new set of lore reveals. Earlier this month, the latest Fazbear Fright book, Step Closer, hit store shelves, and even though it has a super forgettable name, the stories inside of it are epic. Not just because they're some of the most gruesome in the series. I mean, page 1 literally starts with a dream sequence where a kid's eye gets popped by Foxy's hook, but because of the lore drops that are happening in this thing, they are huge. Up until this point, the Fazbear Frights books have given us interesting concepts to chew on, fleshing out the world of FNAF and giving us new insights into events that we already had a pretty good handle on. It's been useful, certainly, but nothing too earth-shattering. Animatronics can have people stuffed inside of them. Confirmed outright in book 1. People can have animatronics stuffed inside of them. Confirmed in book 3. Everything is powered by human agony. The missing children's incident probably happened in 1985. Animatronics can steal identities. Humans can be body swapped with animatronics. Golden Freddy might have multiple souls trapped inside of him. Ghosts might be able to escape from their animatronic prisons to lure more people to them. Like, there has been a lot across all of these stories, hence why I've been covering these books so much. But Step Closer's lore drops are attacking some of the biggest last lingering questions still in existence from these games. The ones presented to us by the two most frustrating games in the franchise, FNAF 4 and FNAF 6. Questions that are still hotly debated by the FNAF community. So today we're looking at the first of those debates, the ones related to FNAF 4, and looking at what those answers mean for the rest of the series. Today, we confirm the identity of this guy, the older brother, Foxy Bro. Real quick though, before we get to the meat of this theory, let's quickly speed our way through probably the least important story of this new trio, the middle one titled Dance With Me. In it, we cover Casey, a young woman who's coming from a tragic childhood. She lives on the street picking pockets and nabbing purses. One day, she robs a mother and a young girl outside of Circus Baby's Pizza World, which we're told has itself a big red door. Woo! Potentially important detail alert. Anyway, one of the items that she nabs is a set of cardboard glasses. When Casey puts them on, she sees a hologram of Ballora spinning in the distance. Weirded out by this, she has other people try the glasses on and no one else manages to see Ballora. From that point onward, each time she puts on the glasses, the hologram gets closer and closer, which begins to freak her out to the point of her leaving town and trying to put her life back together in hopes that it gets Ballora to leave her alone. A couple cities and failed jobs later, Casey eventually decides to return the stolen items to the mother and the daughter, hoping that it'll make amends. The family welcomes her in and forgives her, but when the little girl Isabella puts the glasses on, she not only sees Ballora, but she immediately begins dancing. It's a very vague ending because it's unclear whether Ballora, who was one step away from getting Casey, instead nabs the girl because she's the one who puts the glasses on next, and the dancing is the girl becoming possessed, or if it's the girl just excited to be dancing alongside one of her favorite characters, Ballora. Anyway, there's not a whole lot to talk about with this one. The technology is super strange. Freddy's is apparently advanced enough to have holographics that work in cheap cardboard glasses for kids. That would be strange enough, but there's also some extra weirdness that the holograms can interact with the physical world. We see throughout the story that this Ballora hologram kicks up leaves and causes them to swirl around her. To quote from the story, there was Ballora, pirouetting among the colorful fall leaves. As she spun, the bright leaves were sucked into her vortex. For a few seconds, Casey admired the beauty, but then she thought, wait, if Ballora is just a picture, a hologram, then how is she affecting the objects around her? It didn't make sense. Welcome to the world of being a FNAF theorist, Casey. It didn't make sense. Prepare to get that one tattooed on your forehead. But in all seriousness, it does raise a big question. Is she actually a hologram or just invisible and the glasses are somehow revealing her? It's unclear. Today I'm going to be talking a lot about those weird little details that just seem so oddly specific for a book to call out that it feels like the book is trying to tell us something, and this seems like one of them, but while I could spend a lot of time trying to figure it out, to my knowledge, holographic or invisible animatronics haven't really been a thing yet in the franchise, so we'll just have to cross that bridge when it becomes important. Unless, oh damn it might be a phantom animatronic. No, they don't interact with the real world, do they? Last point to be made about this story though is its recurring theme of mothers and motherhood. A lot of the backstory that we get on Casey is her troubled relationship with her mom, which has played a big part in how her life ended up the way it did. Casey throughout the story is also visited by an older woman at a bus station that gives her grandmotherly advice. She's saved from the police by another elderly woman. She makes amends with that mother and daughter that have a relationship that she envies. I mean, it could be me thinking too much about this, big surprise, but it doesn't feel like a coincidence that Ballora is the main animatronic featured in a story about motherly relationships. I had a theory a long time ago, 2 years ago, that Ballora was some sort of stand-in for Mrs. Afton. Not in any sort of creepy way, get your mind out of the gutters. I mean that she represents the wife that William Afton lost or divorced him, or most likely that he abandoned in the aftermath of his daughter getting clawed to death by Baby. I mean, just look at the song that Ballora sings in Sister Location.
Why do you hide inside your wall when there is music in my hall? All I see is an empty room, no more joy, an empty tomb.
An empty tomb, aka the bedroom of our tragically deceased child. William hides inside his walls by diving even deeper into his work. It's something that William's partner Henry does in the original novel trilogy. When he loses his daughter, he shuts out the rest of the world, hiding behind his walls and obsessing over his work to try and bring her back. And so when William does this in the games, his wife is left alone and probably ends up leaving him. As such, as some sort of coping mechanism, William recreates her in animatronic form, depicting her with perpetually shut eyes because to William, she was blind to what needed to be done to rebuild the family, blind to the fact that his work was so important. She wanted to move on, to do frivolous things like sing and spin and dance, or at least that's how he felt from his perspective. William Afton was mired in his own misery of loss. Like I said, it's a bit of a stretch and something that I've lightly talked about before, but I thought the connection between Ballora and mothers in this story was particularly interesting and worth calling out. Anyway, onward to the real story I want to address today, Step Closer, which isn't just sparking new theories, but is straight up confirming stuff that we've argued about for years. In it, we meet Pete, a 16-year-old who, due to their parents' divorce, has to babysit his little brother, Chuck the Chump. One day, while watching him at a Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, Pete, annoyed about having to be the responsible one, decides to scare Chuck a little by taking him backstage to see an out-of-service Foxy. Pete fires up the machine and Chuck runs away, leaving Pete alone to get seemingly hypnotized by Foxy's performance. A performance that repeats one line over and over. "You can be a pirate, but first you'll have to lose an eye and an arm." And from there, you can probably guess what happens. Over the next few days, Pete gets into multiple accidents that put either his eye or his arm in danger. A scalpel nearly hits his eye in science class. A butcher knife almost chops off his hand at the store. A buzzsaw blade shoots out at him from a nearby construction site. He gets hooked in the face by a fishing line, and he almost loses a hand to a Chinese finger trap at the school carnival. Anyway, the two brothers eventually make amends and come to the realization that Pete needs to face down Foxy to break some curse. Pete rushes to Freddy's, but in his panic, he's hit by an oncoming truck and killed. Out of nowhere. It's this awful reveal that you absolutely do not see coming because you feel so bad for this kid. You're like, oh, he's apologized to his brother. They have a good relationship. They have a plan for getting Pete out of this after him being brutalized for the better part of a week. He's on his way to close off the story and then, bam, it just ends. And that would be where the story ends, except for one thing. Pete is still alive. Kind of. We pick up back in the hospital where Pete's soul is trapped inside of his own dead body. Pete is an organ donor. Against his will, I might add. Thanks a lot for signing me up for that one, Mom. And they just got an emergency request for, you guessed it, an eye and a hand. Pete is forced to helplessly watch as his body is taken apart by surgeons. Like I said at the beginning of this episode, this story is shocking. But what's even more shocking is the lore confirmation that we get in this thing. Pete's story 100% confirms for us that Foxy Bro, the older kid from Fnaf 4 who repeatedly traumatizes his younger brother before eventually getting him chomped in the jaws of Fredbear, that is undeniably Michael Afton. 100% no doubt. It's something that we strongly suspected for a while, and something that later evidence started to throw into question, but this story, happening 5 years after that game's initial release, finally clears it up for us. Obviously, there are some superficial similarities here. Pete has a younger brother who's scared of the animatronics, just like Foxy Bro has the crying child, his younger brother who's scared of the animatronics. Pete is connected to Foxy throughout the story, just like the brother in the Foxy mask. Pete and Chuck's parents are divorced, just like it seems William and Mrs. Afton are in the game, leaving the older brothers alone to care for their younger siblings. At one point in the story, Pete's hand starts to turn purple, which points us back to Michael Afton in sister location physically turning purple. And lastly is that final scene where Pete should be dead, but isn't, which exactly mirrors the iconic words of one Michael Afton.
Father, it's me, Michael. I should be dead, but I'm not.
But all of it is just a bunch of weak parallels between Foxy Bro and Michael and Pete, and Foxy Bro and Pete. How do we know for sure that all three of these characters are connected? One word, gum. People ask me a lot how I come up with these theories, and more often than not, it's small details that just stick out as off for the author or game designer to include, as though they're purposely seeding these details out there to try and signal something to us. And in this particular story, the odd character detail of Pete is that he chews gum a lot. Page 4, he's chewing watermelon gum while watching his brother. Later, when he's scared by the Foxy animatronic, the book makes mention of him swallowing that gum. Okay, that's fine, that's a one-off thing, no big deal. But later, on the way to the butcher shop, we're told that he, quote, pops a wad of watermelon gum into his mouth. On the boat fishing with his dad, he wishes he had brought his watermelon gum. It is mentioned a lot in this short story, enough that it sparked my theorist senses and made me flag it to look into later. Now, obviously, at no point during Fnaf 4, or heck, any of the games, do we see a character actively chewing gum. That'd be silly, but that's not the only place that we see these characters at this point. Let me direct your attention back to the Fnaf survival logbook. Who knew that a book with dabbing Chica as an active selling feature would become the single most important item for lore solving of this franchise? For those of you who don't remember this little gem, it's the logbook, originally owned by Mike, as we see on the title page, that helped us to solve for Cassidy's name. And wouldn't you know it, but today it's also the thing that's gonna now reveal to us Michael Afton's true identity. Page 49, quote, list 10 bad habits you'd like to break. Number 1, chewing gum excessively. I mean, there it is, plain as day. Pete chews gum excessively. Michael Afton chews gum excessively. Pete eventually turns purple and comes back to life after being dead. Michael Afton eventually turns purple and comes to life after being dead. Pete is an older brother who scares his younger sibling using Foxy. Foxy Bro in Fnaf 4 is an older brother who scares his younger sibling with Foxy. Pete equals Michael, and Michael equals Fnaf 4's Foxy Bro. Done, confirmed, another character identity locked. This detail has been sitting in the logbook for years, just waiting to be used. Kind of impressive. Well done there, Scott. Well done. And this confirmation tells us everything we need to know about Michael's motivation for the rest of the game series. He's avenging his brother's death, the one that he made happen. When Golden Freddy appearances are accompanied by the words, "It's me," it is literally the younger brother saying, "It's me. I'm here," to his older brother. But of course, it is never that easy. This same security logbook, this thing that has been so pivotal to solving so many mysteries of this franchise, raises just as many challenges. Because sure, here it just confirmed the Foxy Bro connection, but then it also has lines like these. Page 103, the party was for you. Page 75, does he still talk to you? In reference to psychic friend Fredbear. Page 23, was your favorite childhood toy a plastic purple telephone? Page 20, what do you remember? And most troublesome of all, page 31, do you remember your name? All of these questions seem pointed to the crying child. The party was for him. His favorite toy was the purple telephone. Fredbear did talk to him, and never to Foxy Bro as far as we know. In fact, these are the exact questions that got us to throw the Foxy Michael connection away so many years ago. Why would the spirit in this book, Cassidy, be telling Mike things that are very clearly true of the crying child? If Mike was indeed the older brother the entire time, like this latest Fazbear Fright story just confirmed for us, it doesn't make sense. Which is why now we have to solve these last two questions. What do you remember? Do you remember your name? I mean, yeah, I do remember my name. It's Mike. I wrote Mike on the first page of the book, didn't I? Unless Mike never truly was my name. The question that we're left with, and the question I pose to you and that I still need time to think through, is what did Michael forget? And how did he forget it? Was he the bite of 87 victim? Is that how he lost
Was
his
that the
memory?
bite of
Did
87?
some sort of other trauma cause him memory loss? And more importantly, is there some other strange connection between Michael and the crying child? Like, seriously, why would the book say that the party was for Michael when FNAF 4 clearly tells us that it's not? I can't believe that this is just some sort of typo or something. This book is so precisely engineered to be the linchpin in too many mysteries of this franchise for that to be the case. So could that connection between the two brothers be the reason why Michael's name might somehow be different? All theories for another day, my friends, but at least for now, we're one more confirmed
Honestly, this was a
step
better
closer
episode than
to
the
getting
previous ones were.
answers we've been looking for so long. So maybe that's the reason why the story is in fact called Step Closer, because otherwise that title for a story about a kid losing an eye and an arm just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Next time, we tackle Susie and her connections to FNAF 6. In the meantime, remember that Food Theory exists as a channel and you should subscribe to it. Help us cross 1 million subscribers. I know that you guys can help us do it, and if you like what we do over here, then you're gonna love what we do over there too. So stick around on that channel. I'm having a blast with it, and like I said, if you're into videos about scary restaurants and pizza, well, we've got episodes coming out about both. The dark lore of KFC, and heck, even today's episode about how pizza is technically a sandwich. Link is on screen right now. It's a channel that's giving you lots of cool stuff that you can drop in front of your friends and family. So no longer will they just be rolling your eyes when you talk about animatronic murder. Now you can blow their minds with stuff that they might actually understand and care about. So please check it out. Please subscribe so that way we can get closer to the 1 million subscriber mark, and I'll see you all next week.
Well, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, where today's episode is perhaps the single most important that we've done on the FNAF lore in a long, long time. Today, my friends, our goal is to solve Golden Freddy. That's right, FNAF Reddit, I am justified in using my favorite golden boy in the thumbnail today because this episode is all about him. It's them? Which, I gotta be honest, is probably a good thing because I'm running out of ways to make old Yeller over here look interesting in a thumbnail. I mean, the dude's only got like 2 decent quality images in the entire 6-year history of this franchise. Say what you will about milking this franchise dry, we've milked that image dry. If only every other character in this franchise was as clickable. But seriously, with the recent release of Bunny Call, the 5th Fazbear Fright book, I think we have enough information now to finally put together a quasi-definitive answer on who is in that iconic golden suit, which, gotta be honest, is like the biggest mystery to me in this franchise at this point. Solving this one is like obtaining the first of 3 massive holy grails when it comes to the lore of this franchise. But in order to do it, we're gonna have to look at the games, the books, and the spin-offs, and by the end, we'll have ourselves an answer that not only fits with the established lore of both game and book, but also an answer that satisfies pretty much everything about this character. An answer that irons out all the wrinkles and frustrations that I've had when concocting past theories about this guy. Oh, and it also just picks a little bit at the scabbed over wound of a past theory, poking it just enough that it might get infected. So, are you ready to have your mind blown? Are you ready to finally have the answer to this mystery that has been 6 years in the making? Well then, let's begin with the Stitch Wraith. For those of you who've missed it, the Stitch Wraith story is happening in small chunks at the end of each Fazbear Fright book. It's kind of like an MCU post-credits teaser minus the color-shifting Thanos. It's about an animatronic suit pieced together from the haunted spare parts of various toys and robots, given life through the power of human agony. Now that it's alive, the creature is wandering the city, collecting more haunted toys, and killing people with its zappy hands, sucking their bodies dry and making them cry oily black tears. And up to this point, that's pretty much all we knew about this monstrosity, leading me to conclude that the reason we're meeting this thing is to prove the existence of Remnant, and how it works via negative human emotions. Maybe set him up as the new villain for that upcoming game security breach. Or, at the very least, that's what I thought. But oh no, dear theorists. The Stitch Wraith is far more important than we could have ever imagined. In the epilogue of book number 4, Step Closer, we meet Andrew and Jake, the 2 souls who find themselves trapped inside the Stitch Wraith. And the conversation that they have when they first meet starts to give us some of the lore drops that we have been waiting years to hear. Quote from the book: "Now Jake was inside a metal thing. He didn't know enough about anything to understand what it was, but he did know that he wasn't alone. He was sharing this strange place." "Oh, hi," Jake said. "I'm Jake. Who are you?" "I'm Andrew." The child's voice was rough. He sounded a little like a boy Jake used to know in school, a boy who was always talking back to the teacher and getting himself in trouble. Jake thought Andrew sounded angry. Very angry. End quote. We're told that even though both their souls are infused into the same endoskeleton, Jake is the only one able to move the Stitch Wraith's body. He's also the only one capable of seeing the outside world. Andrew is blind to it all. It's kind of like those 2-man horse costumes. You never want to wind up being the butt in those things, especially on Chipotle days. It's no wonder Andrew's so mad. I'd be too if I was forced to spend an eternity looking at someone else's soul butt. However, it's when they start talking about their former lives that things start to get really interesting. Quote again, "My memories are kind of fuzzy," Jake said. "Fuzzy, yeah, so are mine," Andrew responded. "But I do remember wanting to get back at someone who hurt me. I think I attached myself to him. I got into his soul, made sure he couldn't move on when he should have died. I remember I wanted him to suffer, the way he made me suffer. I remember they tried to kill him, but I wasn't gonna let him go until I was ready." With a story like that, you could almost say that Andrew is a spirit wanting revenge. A literal vengeful spirit, perhaps. Now, loyal FNAF theorists have an idea of where this is all going, right? Back when Ultimate Custom Night first came out, we
Like
theorized that the entire
Golden
game
Freddy or
was
something?
William Afton trapped in a fiery hexscape, a constant cycle of torture and torment at the hands of his past victims. Or should I say one victim in particular, the spirit of Golden Freddy. Sure, he was called by many names, the one you should not have killed, the vengeful spirit, but in the end, by doing the impossible of that game and beating 50-20 mode, it's revealed that Golden Freddy lingers on, twitching with rage, refusing to move on into his afterlife. afterlife. And here, Andrew is pretty much confirming exactly that. Sound the party horns and the children celebrating. It looks like we got one right. Or should I say mostly right? What's interesting about this whole Jake-Andrew conversation from the book is that back with Ultimate Custom Night, we assumed that William Afton was dead and that this was just his afterlife in purgatory or HE double hockey sticks or whatever. He died in Henry's Fire, the one that was set at the end of Fnaf 6, the one meant to bring the whole series to a close. I mean, how could he not be dead? Henry even had that awesome final line for him.
Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole. So don't keep the devil waiting, old friend.
You don't just survive one-liners like that. And yet here, Andrew says that he was actively keeping his killer alive against everyone's attempts on his life. So does that mean that Afton is still... No.
I always come back.
He attack, he protect, he always come back. But just because William may have been kept alive in the book lore doesn't necessarily mean that he was left alive in the game lore too. Well, it shouldn't, but I think it does. Fast forward to this month in our newest book, Bunny Call. What was originally supposed to be the 5th and final installment in the Fazbear Fright series. A literal 5 books at Freddy's. Until of course it got extended and now we have ourselves the bonus 6th and 7th night books. And while the first 2 stories in this new book are interesting and certainly worth talking about on a different day, it's the 3rd one, The Man in Room 1280, that ties into our Golden Freddy mystery today. Stop me if you've heard this one before. It's about a mysterious man in a hospital, burned well beyond the point of death, and yet somehow he remains alive. Quote from the book. The man had no face. A hole in his skull indicated where his nose used to be. Dark, cavernous pits lacking eyes looked at nothing. A toothless mouth gaped without lips to protect it. We'd be remiss if we didn't warn you, the nurse said. We know what that is. Evil, Father Blythe. Evil. In fact, the hospital staff is so convinced that he's the embodiment of evil that they tried to kill him multiple times, via injections, via smothering, via seances, but nothing will do it. He cannot be killed, but not for the reasons that you would expect. It's not an iron will to live or the remnant that's flowing through his veins that's keeping him alive. It's a ghost. Each attempt on the patient's life is thwarted by the ghost of a boy with curly black hair wearing an alligator mask. In fact, the two seem to be intertwined with each other. The story informs us about the patient's brain patterns and they're a bit unusual. Quote, according to the hospital's sleep expert, that particular REM pattern indicates nightmares. Horrific nightmares. See, there and there, the nurse pointed at one part of the brain scan. 2 signals means 2 living things, 2 entities. They're both vying for control of the brain, but they're at odds with each other. We think they're tormenting each other. Sounds a bit like Andrew, right? Andrew attached himself to the man who killed him and refuses to let him die so he can torment him, which is the exact relationship between the vengeful spirit and William Afton in the games. And if there was any doubt about who this mysterious man in the hospital is, the patient wants to go to a Fazbear distribution center, and we're told that the Stitch Wraith mystery is somehow tied to a mysterious fire involving Freddy's and the former owners of the business. Every which way to Sunday, this is our William Afton stand-in for these books. Andrew is our vengeful spirit stand-in, and it feels like the book is trying to tell us that Custom Night wasn't purgatory or heck, it was Afton's living nightmare as he was laying in a hospital bed recovering. William Afton may still be alive, or maybe he was alive and then he eventually explodes. Yeah, the story ends with William's carcass being wheeled out to the Fazbear distribution center, and then it literally blows up like a bomb. It is just as gross and gory and disgusting as you would expect it to be. Maybe it's a good thing that these books don't have pictures. My personal guess is that this is what releases the angry spirit of Andrew into lots of other toys like Fetch and Plush Trap, and it may also be how Afton's soul gets itself into a computer chip that eventually gives life to Glitch Trap. Okay, this has been a lot about Afton, and I promised that this would be a mega theory about Golden Freddy. So how does it all connect together? Well, notice how I described Andrew's ghost, a boy with curly black hair and an alligator mask. It's the same hair as the mysterious dead body found inside Golden Freddy's suit back in Fazbear Frights number 3. Quote from that book, down low past his arm, Devin could see a body, a dead body, but it wasn't exactly like he thought he'd find. This one had curly black hair. The lore of this series doesn't tend to give us a lot, but one thing it tends to keep relatively consistent is hair. So knowing that Andrew is an angry spirit with curly black hair, and that Golden Freddy has a body inside of it with curly black hair, Andrew is pretty clearly our Golden Freddy kid, which makes things related to Andrew roughly related to Cassidy back in the games. Want even more of a connection between the two of them? The name Cassidy is derived from an Irish surname meaning clever or curly-haired. Actually owe that little factoid to Redditor Shrek the First. It's a good find on that one. I actually would have never thought to look into the name Cassidy. So even though Andrew may not be named Cassidy in the books, he is still representing the origin of the name through his hair. Now, here is why all of this matters. Follow me on this. Both Andrew in the books and Cassidy in the games are missing children's incident victims, stuffed inside of suits and angry enough to keep their killer in a purgatory state so he can be tortured. Seems like a pretty slam dunk connection there. We know that up to this point, the books have been hinting at the fact that Golden Freddy may have more than one soul inside of him. And in these stories, we see Andrew actively upset that he has to share an endoskeleton with another dead kid. So is it possible that in the games, Golden Freddy is possessed by both Cassidy and the Bite of 83 victim, Vengeful Spirit and the Crying Child, just like Andrew sharing a body with Jake in the books? After all, we know via clues in the text, as well as book number 6's description, that his endoskeleton mate Jake is a nice kid who died tragically in a hospital. We know that the Crying Child is also a nice kid who dies tragically in a hospital, even though he got bitten before, but you know. Now, admittedly, that alone is a weak sauce connection, I admit it. What's not weak sauce, though, is that evidence is actually out there to prove that two spirits are in Golden Freddy. So last month we proved that Foxy Bro is definitely Michael Afton. It is a huge confirmation from the series, but that came with a set of problems, specifically in the form of the security logbook. The problem is that the spirit Cassidy in the book seems to be talking to Mike about things that only apply to the Bite of 83 victim, saying things like, "The party was for you," and talking about his plastic purple telephone. It doesn't make sense if Cassidy is talking to Michael Afton. But what if Cassidy isn't talking to Mike? What if Cassidy is having a conversation with someone else, with a second spirit? The logbook doesn't just have one person in it, it has two. This was brought to my attention by a comment on YouTube from Inky Ink, who says it's not useful reading the YouTube comments, right? Quote, "I direct you now to pages 89 and 109, where we see a spirit replying to Fated's questions through altering the text existing in the book. Therefore, we know that Fated is not talking to Mike, but talking to Mike's brother, who is also in the logbook. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk." I gotta say, that is the best TED Talk I've ever seen. Definitely beats the one about how to dry your hands using a single paper towel.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
And Inky Ink isn't wrong here either. I went back to double check. One of the things the Fated text says is that the party was for you, and right there on page 89 is the answer, "It was for me." A statement and an acknowledgement of that statement. A conversation. Two spirits, one book. Two spirits, one animatronic. For years, I have been frustrated by the fact that the Crying Child, the Bite victim of 83, would have made the most sense to pass into the Golden Freddy body, but it never lined up with the fact that 5 kids died during the missing children's incident, and that one of them would have had to have gone on to possess Golden Freddy. But now we have a solution to both of those things. Golden Freddy can still have the Bite victim in him, one that says, "It's me," when he sees his brother working as a security guard. But it can also have a second spirit in him, one who died in this horrific missing children's incident murder, and one who continues to torment Afton long after he's passed on. And the logbook isn't done. Sure, on those pages we see the responses of, "It was for me," and "I'm scared," but we also see the responses of, "I can hear sounds," and "I can't see." It, once again, is a parallel back to the Andrew and Jake situation, where one spirit can see and maneuver the body, while the other is trapped down below the surface, able to listen, but unable to do much else. This feels like the solution to Golden Freddy that we've been waiting for. The problem with him is that we've always assumed he was just one kid, one spirit who we tried to make fit into all the various details about the lore, but it never quite worked. And that's because it would never work. In reality, you always needed two entities. One, sensitive and kind, a younger brother looking for peace, and one, the victim of a brutal murder, violently eager for revenge. And here's the real twist, my friends, that might not be all. There's one last small detail in the Stitch Wraith story that we have to keep an eye on. We learn in that story that Jake and Andrew aren't intentionally murdering people, that when they reach out to touch someone, they accidentally zap them. Jake assumes it's Andrew doing it, but he's wrong. Final quote quote from the book. I just want to scare people, okay? The zap is killing them. Well, that wasn't what I wanted. So if what you're doing isn't doing what you want, maybe it's doing something someone else wants. Maybe something else is here with us. You were a hitchhiker on the man who killed you. Why can't someone else hitchhike with us? So it looks like there might be more souls involved when it comes to Golden Freddy, but that's a story for another day. And with that, my friends, it's the last book until next year. There's definitely a few stories I haven't talked about that merit another video or two, but for now, Fazbear Frights and all its numerous lore reveals have come to an end, which I gotta say I'm kinda sad about. These have been a great way to engage with the mysteries of the franchise with the slow drip coming out over the course of this year, like a book every other month. It's been a really cool release strategy. And honestly, some of these stories are the creepiest things produced by this franchise in a long time. Anyway, I guess the only thing left at this point is crossing our fingers for that new game to come out soon? Now? Alright, Scott, don't you release another game on us or anything. No? Huh, that used to work. Oh well, probably better to wait anyway. Halloween is just around the corner, and there's not a whole lot of other ways we're gonna be able to celebrate it this year. But hey, if you haven't checked out these books yet, but are a fan of the series, then check them out using our sponsor for today's episode, Audible. It's one thing to read these stories, it's another thing to hear these stories. I gotta say, nothing is better than hearing a scary story told aloud, and Audible has great recordings of all 5 of the Fazbear Frights books, not just fully narrated, but also full of sound effects that really enhance the story. It really gets you into that cool, frightened mood, especially when you listen alone in the dark at night. But okay, you already know Audible is the leading provider of audiobooks, and I'm sure you're familiar with how Audible members get a credit to pick a new title every month, plus 2 Audible originals from a monthly selection. But did you know that Audible is currently giving back to the world in a big way? I actually really love this new initiative of theirs, and I'm really glad that they're letting me talk about it here. Basically, Audible recognizes that we're kind of in a time of crisis, guys, because of the pandemic, school schedules being all over the map, parents looking for new ways to entertain and educate their kids, all of us just being a little bit too sick of our screens. So Audible launched a whole new site called stories.audible.com, where you can stream hundreds of Welcome to Game Theory, the show that's always a bloody good time. Today, we have a few massive announcements before we get to the episode, so please skip to here if you're not interested in them, but I don't think you should do that because these aren't things you're gonna wanna miss. First, and most importantly, mark your calendars because on Tuesday, December 1st, right here on this channel, I am unveiling our biggest project ever. And I don't take that lightly. The Game Theory $1 million challenge. It's a merch launch. Theoryware X Fnaf. The animatronics have taken over. Death coins are on the loose, and we've officially partnered with Five Nights at Freddy's itself to create this monstrosity. The first official joint Game Theory and Fnaf project ever. It's not every day that you get an ugly Christmas sweater with pizza detailing. Grab it now before it grabs you. I'm also really proud of this hoodie I helped to create based off of everyone's favorite low-paying security guard position at your local pizzeria. So may your days be merry and bright, and may your nights be scary and full of fright. Anyway, like I said, links for all of that stuff is down below this video. So, as you might be able to tell, between planning the live stream and working on the merch, there has been a lot going on. And in the middle of it all, more Fnaf. Fnaf Security Breach got its first trailer out during a PlayStation 5 announcement event, and man, does this new game look incredible.
Gregory, your friends are worried about you.
Long gone are the days of just looking at static-filled still image camera feeds, my friends. And before we move on, can I just say how cool it is to see an indie franchise started by one man working at Dollar General rise to the point that it's now getting a spotlight alongside time-honored franchises like Final Fantasy and God of War. And not only getting spotlight alongside them, getting more views than nearly everything else in that showcase. That's awesome. Well done, Scott. Really, really well deserved. Now, based on the trailer, it looks like we'll be trapped inside of a Freddy Fazbear's Pizzaplex, playing a life or death game of hide and seek against a killer. And it's that killer, Vanny, that I really want to dive into today. She's teased twice in the trailer, once via a bunny-shaped shadow in the opening sequence, and again as the final jump scare. Now, we've suspected for a while that she's coming, via teaser images on Scott's website, merch leaks, Easter eggs hidden throughout Fnaf VR, all things that I've covered before in past theories. But the thing I wanted to look closer at today is her backstory and her relationship to Glitchtrap. Because even though this game hasn't come out yet, and we honestly don't know when it's coming out, we do already know a ton about this new character. In fact, true to Scott's style of storytelling, we probably won't get that much of a backstory for Vanny in this new game. I don't know if you've noticed this about Scott's games, but important story bits tend to happen around the games rather than in the games. Let me explain with an example. In Sister Location, we end with Baby being a part of Ennard, and if you get the super secret ending, you see that she gets puked up into a sewer. Fast forward to Fnaf 6, and they're suddenly two separate entities again, Scrap Baby and Molten Freddy. To 99.9% of the players, you would have no idea how or why that would have happened. And I can't blame them, because the only way you would know that Baby got voted out of the Ennard tribe was via the source code on Scott's website, as well as a separate standalone site, FNAFworld.com. Just goes to show that when you're talking about FNAF, the game never really stops. And the thing is, I think Vanny is already getting treated this same way. The information about her, what is now getting her to kill, the big twist reveal about Vanny's true nature has already been laid out for us, if you're paying attention to all parts of the FNAF universe. So if, unlike me, you don't have time to keep track of the 12 games, 9 books, dozens of ports, hundreds of toys, and a moon-faced animatronic and a pizza tree, well, that's why I'm here. Because all the pieces are out there in place for us, and now we're gonna be putting them back together to understand the true backstory of Vanny, the Killer Bunny, Purple Guy 2.0, before Security Breach comes out. Recently, the game Fnaf Help Wanted got itself a mobile port. Big whoop, right? We've already seen this game 2 other times before, once in VR and again in a flat console port. Don't get me wrong, love this game, probably my favorite game of the franchise, but still, Scott, you ain't getting me to buy this for a third time. He totally got me to buy it a third time. So because this is a mobile port, a lot of the game has been stripped away. Gone is the intro sequence, gone are some of the game modes, but most notably gone are the hidden cassette tapes that tell the story of Help Wanted's failed development. Now, if you remember back to a year ago, collecting all 16 of those hidden tapes in the original game inadvertently assembled our latest villain, Glitchtrap, piece by piece, and once fully together, he was able to capture us in the game and presumably escape back out into the real world. That's all gone now in the mobile version. In its place, though, maybe something better. Immediately upon opening up the game, it becomes clear that this mobile port is more broken than FNAF World 1.0. Got textures glitching out in both the main hub and in the various minigames. Now, obviously, these are intentional effects, and by zooming in and tapping on them repeatedly, honestly, I can't say exactly what I did to do it. I just was there a long time pounding away at my screen. The screen eventually fades to black, and suddenly you're presented with everyone's favorite part of the series, an 8-bit minigame with rudimentary gameplay steeped in symbolic lore. Okay, it's actually more like 16-bit at this point, but still. We're told that this game is called Princess Quest, with you playing as a little girl lighting torches to unlock doors and running away from glitching bunny people. Glitching bunnies, you say? After making your way through a ruined castle and cemetery, you eventually unlock a long corridor that leads to a final lantern and, no points if you guessed it, Glitchtrap himself. The screen goes dark and suddenly you're taken back to the game's main hub. Now, this seems fairly self-explanatory, right? It's a reference to Glitchtrap in a game that had to eliminate him due to size constraints. But it's the details here that really matter. Not counting the torches in front of the 6 gravestones, which are very clearly references to the original 5 missing children plus the child who possesses the puppet, there are 16 torches in total for the princess to light. This isn't a coincidence. It perfectly lines up with the 16 cassette tapes that you had to collect in the original Help Wanted in order to release Glitchtrap. In fact, Glitchtrap only appears once the 16th one is lit, further cementing that connection. But where things get really interesting is when you decode what Glitchtrap is saying. As the game ends, there's clearly a dialogue box along the bottom containing weird glitching text, but you'll notice that the patterns aren't random. Some shapes actually repeat themselves. These right here and these right here. It's actually a letter substitution code that spells out everyone's favorite phrase from the game.
I always come back.
And taking it all one step further, we can actually extract the audio from this moment and do some audio trickery. By doubling the speed and then reversing it, we get this. I always come back, let me out. So in essence, Princess Quest is showing us a recreation of the events from the original Help Wanted. This does a couple of things for us. First, it basically proves 100% that this is, in fact, William Afton's spirit and not some sort of AI or code meant to replicate him. It is him through and through. Dude wasn't lying when he said he always comes back. He's got more lives than Jason Voorhees. He's also got himself a solid understanding of brand consistency. Afton always comes back. Secondly, though, what Princess Quest is doing is confirming for us the origin story of our new killer, Vanessa. In the original game, the fate of Tape Girl was unclear because she sometimes encouraged us to collect the tapes and sometimes didn't. But here we get clarity on the whole story. Vanny is the princess with the lantern. She collects all the tapes, pieces, whatever, and gets taken over by Glitchtrap. This all confirms what we were speculating about before with Vanny in a previous theory from a year ago, that a young woman named Vanessa, Vanny for short, would be taken over by Afton to kill in his name, brainwashed or partially controlled by a spirit living inside of her.
Yes, I hear you. I know. No. There's no miscommunication.
There's also a similar conversation currently hidden in the source code of Scott's website, except here you see both sides of the conversation. Stay the course.
I will.
Focus on my voice.
I will.
Don't let anyone lead you astray.
I won't.
Have you selected one?
I have.
The one that seems to be selected is Gregory from the new game's trailer.
Gregory, be still. I think she's found us.
So, is that it? Just a recap of a lot of information we already knew? Are we just left to speculate about the rest until Security Breach finally comes out? Well, no. You see, in the last year, there's been one final source of information about Vanny, and it's a big one. A game that I've largely ignored up until now, Fnaf's augmented reality game, Special Delivery. If you haven't heard about this one, basically the concept is that animatronics get shipped to your home so you'll have yourself some new friends. Because let's be honest, fighting for your life against a malfunctioning robot is probably still better than trying to hold a normal conversation with a living, breathing human being. I think I've been dancing around this one just because the possible canonicity of characters like Shamrock Freddy, Liberty Chica, and Clown Springtrap makes me have a nervous breakdown. But questionable lore implications of Flamethrower Bear Endo aside, this game has been seeding us more info over the entire last year about the history of Vanny and Glitchtrap, and it requires us to do one of the scariest tasks any FNAF game has ever required: reading emails. You see, the game will occasionally share you on emails that aren't intended for your eyes. On one side, we have ourselves the story of a company working on behalf of Fazbear Entertainment to disassemble old animatronics and scan their circuit boards into their computer system. And, just like Tape Girl warned us about back in FNAF VR, this causes a virus to spread through the system. Quote from those emails, "Turns out that wasn't a glitch. We released a virus when we scanned that last circuit board. It's spreading really fast. We're gonna need all hands on deck." New email. "Hey Jim, just checking in. I emailed you earlier this week about a virus caused by one of your circuit boards, which is currently spreading throughout our system and causing serious problems. Please contact me ASAP. Thanks, best, Steve." So that is our Glitchtrap origin story. And to me, it's especially interesting because I think it helps explain something that dates all the way back to FNAF 3. Recently in the series, we've learned that the FNAF games are canon in the games. Now, that's a really confusing sentence, so let me explain. In both FNAF VR and the Fazbear Frights books, it's confirmed that the urban legends about murders happening at Freddy's restaurants are mainstream enough to have gotten some video game spin-offs. not necessarily the FNAF games that we know, and certainly not FNAF World, since everyone, including Scott, wants to forget that one, but games inspired by the legends of the pizzeria. In FNAF VR, in fact, we're told that they were made by Fazbear Entertainment as a cover-up.
Fazbear Entertainment hired the game developer. Those indie games were designed to conceal and make light of what happened. This isn't just an attempt to rebrand. It's an elaborate cover-up.
And looking back on it, I believe that we've seen those games. I think we've played those games. They're the 8-bit minigames from FNAF 3, Mangle's Quest, BB's Air Adventure, Chica's Party, and Stage 01. Heck, they might even include the Take Cake, Give Gifts, etc. minigames from FNAF 2. Those are the games being referenced in the games. I mean, they even have those sorts of cheesy titles that would come with cheap Atari-style games of that era. And how do we know all of this, and why am I talking about it now? Because of Glitch Trap. It's easy to forget, but the last minigame that you have to play in FNAF 3 features a glitched out bunny hopping I didn't even mean to put the pun there, hopping between the various minigames. This is the first appearance of Glitch Trap. It's Afton's spirit trapped inside the circuit boards of these retro games looking for an escape. An escape that doesn't actually get realized until he's scanned into a new modern computer system meant to produce FNAF VR. Now, admittedly, this is a bit confusing when it comes to the timeline. We know Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was founded in 1983, as we see from the VR coins in Help Wanted. In FNAF 1, Phone Guy tells us that the animatronics have been around for 20 years. That puts FNAF 1 in 2003, not 1993 like I previously thought. And based on the official description for FNAF 3, Fazbear's Fright and the discovery of Springtrap all happened 30 years after the closure of Freddy's, making that one roughly 2033. Now, we have no idea when and how Afton got a piece of his soul into the circuit boards, probably via his extreme agony at getting spring locked. But if this company is literally opening animatronic suits sent from Fazbear Entertainment and scanning the boards as implied by the emails, are we assuming that they opened up the Springtrap suit, completely ignored the dead body inside, and scanned it? Just doesn't seem likely to me. Is Fazbear Entertainment rescuing the board after he was burned to death in FNAF 6? It's just odd. This is why I don't like to talk timeline with this series anymore. To me, the simplest solution here is that William Afton's soul is just in multiple places at once, split like a Harry Potter Horcrux, only instead of swords and scars, he's split between suits and circuit boards. And one of those iterations is Glitch Trap, stuck in the various games' codes until he's eventually released. But reminding all the way back to FNAF Special Delivery, there's a separate and related story happening in the secret inbox between Lewis and his fellow employee, Ness. Ness, as in Vanessa. It's Vanny again, my friends. Here we see a series of emails where Ness is acting weird, and Lewis, the IT guy, is honestly acting weirder because he's creeping on Ness. Here's a few highlights from these emails. Hey Ness, it's no big deal, but I wanted to reach out off the radar and remind you about the company policy about personal internet usage. Certain words and phrases trigger red flag reports, so your last order got automatically sent to me. Basically, anything mentioning torture is gonna raise the alarm. If you have any questions about the policy, let me know. We could even get coffee or something and go over all the words to avoid. And now I've raised my own red flag. Good thing I'm the one who gets the notification. Smiley, Lewis. Hey Ness, wanted to see if you're doing okay. I appreciate your taking my advice about red flag search terms. If I thought I'd have to file an incident report on you, I think I'd just have to quit instead. I was a little worried maybe something is going on with you. One day you're researching flowers and the migration pattern of bees. Fascinating, right? And the next day you type in, how far can a human being be cut in half before losing consciousness? I figured maybe you're writing a screenplay or something. Always here if you need me, Lewis. Hey, Ness. So the word compliance by itself isn't gonna set off any red flags, but the sentence, how to induce compliance in human subjects and how to induce self-compliance did actually get my attention. I think the answer might involve chocolate chip cookies. Always works for me. I also thought it was strange that these were immediately followed by searches that couldn't possibly have any relevant answers for you. Did you search for help by itself? Anyway, my offer still stands if you want to go over the company policy. I'm free any day after work. We could grab dinner, or coffee if you want, Lewis. Oh, Lewis, when you say stuff like that, it makes me
a sad panda.
But HR violations aside, these conversations tell us a lot about Vanny's mental state. She is sharing control of herself with Glitchtrap. That's why we get references to her searching the internet for help. It's part of her psyche crying out for anything, anyone who can save her, anything that'll provide an escape. It's also why it's so important that Lewis calls out the searches for inducing compliance in human subjects and inducing self-compliance. That is Glitchtrap, searching for a way to gain complete control over Vanny, over her psyche. This further confirms something that we talked about in my last theory on Vanny. In that episode, we talked about how she's a reluctant follower, that Afton isn't in complete control. On Scott's Voices.com page, where he tends to hire out actors for the various vocal roles in the game, Vanny's listing was for a character named Reluctant Follower. So this woman is clearly a devotee, brainwashed or controlled by Afton to an extent, but a part of her is actively fighting back, hesitant to do what he asks, which makes me think that in Security Breach, we may be able to save or redeem her. In fact, knowing that may help us out with the gameplay. Maybe it's a secret or a true ending condition. That, my friends, is what I believe to be the big twist that awaits us in Security Breach. Wait, as I finish this video, of course, new statues just dropped with important lore reveals, so let's just talk about these real fast. With Gregory hiding inside of Freddy, definitely looks like my idea about gameplay being a version of hide and seek is absolutely confirmed, or maybe Gregory is just piloting an 80s era bear-shaped Gundam suit. Either way, I am totally living for it. As for the other statue that just dropped, looks like Vanny is gonna be taking a page out of the Afton playbook, the classic security guard by day and serial killer at night. Old habits die hard, I guess, but in Vanny's case, here's my question: is she gonna remember it? My guess is no. I think it's gonna be a classic case of Jekyll and Hyde. But who knows? I guess we're just gonna have to wait and see what it is. I hear that some big things are coming to this franchise before the end of the year, and I'm not just talking about all that cool new merch we dropped, which, as one last reminder, is all available right below this video. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Whoa, cool video.
Ugh, lame. Boring. Been there, done that one. Guys, huddle up. Y'all here? It's kind of hard to count you all. At this point, there's more of you than there are Pokemon species. Paper plate people.
Here.
Obscure lore-filled egg baby.
Here.
Jar of pickles. Great, listen up everyone. Y'all have a big problem on your hands. You all are yesterday's news. People know about you. They survived you. They remember you. Well, except for you, egg baby. Long story short, guys, people know what to expect of you. To be scary, you need to be unexpected, new, unpredictable. And that's why, gentle bears and lady chicks, I introduce you to the new breed. Welcome to the family, guys. Internet, welcome to Game Theory, the show where my waistline is extending faster than the Fnaf universe. When it comes to Five Nights at Freddy's, I've made no small deal about how huge this franchise has gotten. I mean, if you're looking to keep up with all the lore, this year, 2020 alone is home to not one, but 5 new book releases. As if 7 main games, 4 spin-offs, and the Still in the Works movie weren't enough. But there was an announcement made by Scott earlier this year that I've been wanting to talk about for a while. An announcement that, to me, isn't just important to this franchise, but is important for all of gaming. Between all my jokes about how much I hate the franchise and how complex the lore has gotten, I've always said that the way Scott has crafted these games and how he's managed to run his community is perhaps the smartest, most modern way of making a video game. From the very first Five Nights game, he understood that the current age of gaming is all about sharing your experiences, that no two playthroughs should ever be alike, that obscure screens, jump scares, glitches, minigames, all of it should appear randomly and with very small probabilities so that people can go online and ask their friends, wait, did you see that? Was this a real thing? From the first appearance of Golden Freddy in the newspaper clippings in Fnaf 1, all the way up to help wanted surprise Easter eggs of coffee from his early game The Desolate Hope, these sorts of things form the lifeblood of this franchise. That is what gets people talking about your game, and sharing your game, and sharing videos of your game. And yet, it's a game design feature that shockingly modern developers just don't seem to do. But all of that's happening on the micro scale. Today we're zooming out to talk about the big picture. Another move that Scott's made that completely bucks the trend of modern game development and truly embraces what it means to lead a successful franchise in 2020 and beyond, an age of creators and accessible game-making tools. I'm speaking, of course, about the Fazbear Fanverse Initiative, something Scott announced back in August of this year. In case you haven't heard about this thing, here's a quote from the Reddit post. There have been some great fan-made spin-off universes created in this community, and I want to see them keep going. That's why I've put some of my own cash toward development of new games in those game series. However, I'm going to stay out of the development side of things so that these creators can do their thing. They're going to develop these games and interact with the fan base just as they would have normally. And when the games are done, they'll be released on Game Jolt for free, just like normal. The difference now is that they'll also be bundled up with other games and sold on most major consoles and mobile as well. At least that's the plan. Did I mention there may be some toys and other merchandise of these fan games too? It's a project that's designed to invest in those franchises, give back to the developers, and hopefully bring new entries to those franchises as well. So the TLDR version of this, Scott's pulling a reverse Nintendo. He's embracing and extending fan games. He's investing in them, helping them with distribution, and heck, maybe even merch. The first wave of this initiative involves 5 titles. Five Nights at Candy's 4, which, you know, is just FNAF, but with cats. Pop Goes Evergreen, which is, you know, FNAF with rodents. One Night at Flumpty's, which is FNAF with eggs. The Joy of Creation, which is FNAF but on fire. And FNAF Plus, which is, well, it's just FNAF Plus. That is obviously a big simplification of all these games just for the joke, but you get the point here. They're all spin-off games with the basis of Five Nights at Freddy's. Now, all of this sounds well and good, right? I mentioned that it seemed like Scott Cawthon was taking the initiative to embrace and extend existing fan works, and those are words with warm and fuzzy vibes, but they're also words that have, well, they have themselves a history that's a lot less warm and fuzzy than you might think, thanks to a third E that's less mentioned, extinguish. That might sound harsh and seem like it's coming out of nowhere, so let me explain what I mean with all this. I think it's necessary to talk about another company that publicly took the embrace and extend approach and what it meant.
What happened to the Fanverse Initiative?
Scott is taking a similar approach.
Did that just not come to fruition or something? Like, what's going on with that?
On everyone's favorite game theory topic, antitrust law. Antitrust law seems to be a hot topic these days, with Facebook robot Mark Zuckerberg and Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey getting grilled in front of Congress this year, not just once, but twice. While it might be a trending topic in 2020, big tech companies getting taken to task for monopolistic and anti-competitive business practices is nothing new. Back in the 90s, before companies like Google and Twitter and Facebook were but a twinkle in some source code's eye, the tech giant that everyone had their sights on was Microsoft. And mind you, this was almost a decade before anyone had even heard of an Xbox. This is back in the days of Internet Explorer, who, let me tell you, was facing some fierce competition from the likes of Chrome? Firefox? Heck no, this is the 90s, baby. Their competition looked a lot more like Netscape Navigator and Mosaic, and Microsoft resorted to some, not so pleasant, and as it turns out, not so legal tactics in order to edge out the competition. During the 90s, Microsoft was public about their strategy of embrace and extend. The basic idea is that you start by finding something that someone else has made, like a technology standard, a protocol, or a tool of some kind, and say, cool, we're gonna embrace it it and start using it ourselves. And then you extend upon it by saying, well, this thing that someone else made is cool and all, but we're gonna make it even bigger and better. We're gonna build our own proprietary technology on top of it, and people can begin using our version of that old standard. Steve Ballmer, who at the time was the executive vice president of Microsoft and went on to be president and later CEO, described it in an interview with the New York Times. Quote, "New products and services should simply be extensions of the old. Whether it's me or the guy who replaces me because we don't do well, we'll keep coming, and we will do well." Yeah, I'd say you did pretty well for yourself, Microsoft, and largely because of this embrace and extend motto. Heck, according to one article I read, a Microsoft employee even wrote a song titled "The Battle Hymn of the Reorg" that ended with that exact phrase. The song goes a little something like this. "Oh, our eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the net. We are ramping up our market share. Objectives will be met. Soon our browser will be everywhere. You ain't seen nothing yet. We embrace and we extend." Man, and I thought I was nerdy. On its face, the policy of embracing and extending tools and protocols made by other people seems generous, right? You're adding to what's already there. But what this hides is the fact that once you take an existing standard and extend it with your own proprietary technology, you own the part that you're adding. And not only that, you're replacing the original public open standard with your own version that you alone have control over, effectively taking ownership over a standard that someone else created. And when Microsoft talked publicly about the first two E's, there was a hidden third E that they didn't like to mention in public: extinguish. Because once you've extended the old standard with your own proprietary additions, having effectively hijacked something that someone else had made, you now have control that you can use to extinguish the competition. By the way, that third E, extinguish, isn't just speculation on the part of Microsoft haters. Though Microsoft never talked about it publicly for obvious reasons, an investigation by the US Department of Justice found that the motto "extend, embrace, extinguish" was used in Microsoft internal communications. And considering that the entire court case centered around the fact that Microsoft was allegedly using anti-competitive practices to bar other companies from competing with them, the fact that they were literally trying to extinguish the competition didn't work all that well in their favor. Pro tip: if you have a business strategy that's evil and illegal, try not to use words that make it sound evil and illegal. And then don't use it in company emails, you doof. The Microsoft example is a bit technical, but it's easy to see examples of a similar strategy used in the entertainment world if you look at Disney. Rather than creating their own original stories, they began by embracing folk tales and classic stories in the public domain, like Sleeping Beauty, Beauty and the Beast, Cinderella, and The Little Mermaid. No problems there. They were open and available for anyone to use. Then they extended these classic fairy tales by creating their own animated versions of these stories with their own spins on them. But then they effectively extinguished competition by replacing the original work with their own. And when it comes to protecting their own characters and copyright, Disney is fiercely controlling. Unlike Microsoft, Disney has managed to do this without breaking any laws. Technically speaking, they just lobby to change the copyright laws. Mickey Mouse, as a 92-year-old character at this point, should technically be in the public domain by now, except for the fact that the laws seem to mysteriously change every time his copyright is set to expire. Strange coincidence, huh? Couldn't possibly have anything to do with the millions of dollars that Disney is spending to lobby Congress every time it happens, could it? Nah. There is some serious irony in the fact that Disney has worked so hard to prevent their characters from entering the public domain, despite the fact that they began as a company by creating their own versions of classic public domain stories. And in many cases, Disney's versions of these stories have effectively replaced the originals in the public consciousness, which I gotta say is a shame considering I personally want to re-experience the original Little Mermaid's ending, where, you know, she's given a dagger and has to choose to murder the prince or herself. And the Red Sea at sunset is actually the result of her blood pouring out into the water. Yep, that is the original story. Can't imagine why people would prefer the Disney version. Anyway, it's not all that surprising that you go to the books section of Amazon and search for classic fairy tales like Cinderella. The first thing that pops up is a Disney coloring book. Disney's worked really hard to make sure that their version of the story is the only version of the story that matters. So is Scott Cawthon guilty of doing the same thing here? Funding fan projects might seem like a generous gesture, gesture, but is this really part of his plan for world domination? Well, the short answer here is no. In fact, while his strategy might at first appear to have some superficial similarities with the behavior of Microsoft in the 90s, you can actually argue that he's doing the exact opposite of the business practices that we see from companies like Microsoft and Disney. And this applies to basically every step in the process. For instance, Microsoft worked by embracing public standards or products that other people had created, and Disney worked by embracing fairy tales and folk stories from the public domain. They were effectively targeting things that other people had created. But here, Scott is honing in on what's effectively his territory to begin with. Scott's own work is the foundation on which these fan creations were made. They exist with his blessing. This is something that we talked about in our Fnaf fan art video from last year, but the long and short of it is that while Scott doesn't have the rights to publish work created by fans without their permission, fans don't have the rights to publish work based on his characters without his permission. All the fan creators are working with Scott's blessing, but ultimately it's his characters and intellectual property to do with as he pleases. He's not capturing someone else's folklore and planting his flag in it to claim ownership over it. His flag was already there to begin with. And what's more, he's doing this with the full consent of the fan creators, which brings us to the second E, extend. Rather than trying to extend these fan works for himself in a way that would allow him to claim creative ownership over them the way that Microsoft did, he's leaving the power in the hands of the fan creators and letting them be the ones to extend their own fan lore. And lastly, the third E, extinguish. Once again, it feels like Scott's doing the opposite of the original EEE strategy. Rather than trying to quash other creators so that the only thing left in the space is his original FNAF games, the entire point of this initiative is to include and promote other creators who can offer their fan games as an alternative. Not satisfied with only 7 official FNAF games? Here, check out what other people have made. And now, you can check them out on more platforms since they're coming to consoles and smartphones, and Scott Cawthon has given them the development resources to make it happen. So yeah, I think that far from being an example of a monopolistic business trying to control everything, this is an example of the opposite. Rather than being overprotective with his IP and issuing a cease and desist to anyone who tries to create their own fan game or spin on his creation, Scott is doing the opposite. He's giving the fan community's biggest developers even more resources, all while letting them have control over their own products. If all of this is starting to sound like one big puff piece and you're feeling ripped off that you got this far into a video without any tea being spilled, sorry, the drama you're looking for is in another castle. Because this, to me, feels like the future of the games industry. In the internet age, this age of social media, we are a culture of remixers. We meme, we take other people's creativity, we build upon it. We embrace the worlds that they've created to make our own original works via fan art, via fan fiction. And that is something that should be welcomed, embraced. If your product is important enough in someone's life that they want to develop their own version of it, they want to show their own fandom by doing their own video, game, whatever, that is a compliment. You hire them, you bless their work, you be a mentor to them, whatever it is. I can't help but think about Sonic Mania, which was created by a team known for their work in the Sonic fan game and ROM hack communities. And Sega gave them the keys to the kingdom to produce what's probably the best canonical Sonic game in recent history. Now contrast Scott and Sega's behavior with Nintendo, banning Twitch live streams for games that were paid for and played on release day, shutting down fan games because they were worried about it competing with their own products, shutting down tournaments run by people that are still really passionate about a multiplayer game that was originally released back in 2001. Sorry to pick on you, Nintendo, but I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't think it was deserved. These are bad moves. When games like Pokemon Uranium or another Metroid 2 remake come out, you just kill them. You stomp on them. What could be, and are in many cases, fully fleshed out games made by creators who spent years putting them together out of a love for your work, you put them through a shredder. Congratulations, you protected your IP, but you killed the love of your community in the process. And from a purely financial standpoint, heck, you could have just embraced those projects, could have hired those people on, you polish them up a little bit, you had 2 quick and easy money makers. If you're thinking about it from just the pure cold-hearted dollars and cents, that is money you left on the table, period. I'm sorry, times have changed and the industry needs to change with them. With so many scummy, exploitative, and downright crummy business practices that exist within the gaming industry, it can be easy to lose sight of the positive stories, the companies that are doing it right. And if we're able to recognize the more positive examples of how some companies are able to succeed by doing the right thing, maybe we can get just a little bit more of that sort of thing. Fnaf is a huge example of a game that isn't just a game. It's a community of fans that pour tremendous amounts of love and effort into making their own content. Whether it's the Let's Play videos studios that first brought the game onto the scene during its early days, or the people that have gone the extra mile and been inspired to create their own fan games. The Fazbear Fanverse Initiative is a great example of what can happen when fans love a game franchise, and the franchise is willing to love them back. I just wish more people were paying attention. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Oh, the frick? Sorry.
Jake, can you hear me, Jake? What did you do today, Jake? I went to the movies. We watched a scary one. It was so scary that I jumped out of my seat and spilled my popcorn everywhere. Did you do that, Jake? Were you there? Jake. Then I went to the arcade. I ate a bunch of pizza there. I got red tomato sauce all over my mouth and more red on my clothes. There were so many other kids there, and then there weren't. I love you, Jake. You know that, right? I love you. Open the cabinet, Jake. Come over here. Open the cabinet, Jake. Open it. Open it. Open it. Open the cabinet, Jake. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, where today the theory is coming from you. That's right, just because we're all still waiting for Security Breach to release doesn't mean that FNAF theorists out there have been twiddling their thumbs. In fact, the lack of a new game has prompted the community to go back and comb over all the pieces that were in place for us before. Pieces that we might have overlooked or missed the first time out. And it was this thorough re-review of the clues that prompted what may be the biggest fan theory to blow up in over a year. And that's saying a lot, since 2020 was full of us connecting massive pieces of this franchise's lore. I mean, with the help of Fazbear's Frights, throughout last year's videos, we managed to pinpoint the year of the missing children's incident as 1985. We solidly connected Foxy Bro to Michael Afton. We even concluded the high likelihood that 2 spirits are trapped inside Golden Freddy, not just one. Our vengeful spirit Cassidy, as well as our Bite of 83 victim, the Crying Child. But have you ever noticed that that kid doesn't have a name? I mean, it's been 6 years since he was introduced into the franchise in FNAF 4, and we still don't have any hints as to what Crying Child's name might actually be when he's, you know, experiencing literally any other emotion. Wait, is that Crying Child? But no, that's Happy Child, and that's Angry Child, and that's Confused Child. That's Apathetic Child. That is Passionate Child. Nope, not that one. Ooh, is that Emotionally Repressed Child? Hashtag relatable there. But really, take a moment to think about that. We know the puppet's name, Charlie, and her father, Henry. We know that baby was originally Elizabeth Afton. Purple guy / Springtrap is William Afton. Other purple guy is Michael Afton. There's the missing children's incident victims, Jeremy, Fritz, Susie, Gabriel, and Cassidy, the vengeful spirit, who is at least one of the things trapped inside Golden Freddy. I mean, there is a name for pretty much every single character in this franchise, except for this one kid. The one kid who, wouldn't you know, was also important enough to have the first on-screen death of the series. Feels like we should probably be able to solve this one by now, right? Like, we should probably have gotten a name for him somewhere along the line, or at the very least, the means by which to solve for his name. The pieces have got to be in place for us, right? Well, today might just be the day where we solve exactly that. One Reddit user named Wolfie1740 Kingdom thinks that they've cracked the code to finally solve the final name of the FNAF mystery, to finally give the Crying Child, the Bite of 83 victim, a proper identity. So break out your tambourines, theorists, because it's Morty time. It's a theory review.
Leave your theories in the comments below. I'll pick my favorites in the next episode of Morty.
Now, today's theory starts where all the best theories begin, dabbing Chica. That's right, folks, we're back to the most important lore item in the whole franchise. Not any of the novels. Certainly not the games. Those are just afterthoughts at this point. Nope, it's back to the children's activity book, FNAF Survival Logbook. In a past FNAF theory, we had a huge revelation about how this thing works. Basically, there are 3 people present within this book. There's Mike, who's alive and always writes everything in red pen. There's Cassidy, who haunts the book and speaks in ghostly perfectly faded text, but there's a second spirit here, the crying child, who's forced to communicate by actually altering the words that are found in the book. The example that proves it is right here. Cassidy says, "The party was for you," and the crying child responds on page 89 by altering the text of the book to read, "It was for me." We know FNAF 4's party wasn't for Mike, and we know Cassidy wouldn't be saying this to themselves. As such, it must be crying child acknowledging what Cassidy has said. Same thing here on page 59 with Cassidy asking, "What do you see?" and crying child answering on page 109, "I can't see." Again, altering the actual print of the logbook. So that alone was pretty huge, and it went a long way to supporting the theory that both Cassidy and crying child possess Golden Freddy. And that alone would be pretty awesome, but it still leaves a major part of this book unsolved. You see, on page 95, there's a loose thread that's never been tied up, one that has personally driven me crazy for years. It's a grid where you're told to draw an 8-bit Foxy. Just another random activity in this children's workbook, right? Wrong. The grid is numbered, and you can see in faint print that you're supposed to put letters into the squares, with the first few already being put in. So in our quest to solve Golden Freddy's name years ago, we collected the page numbers where the phrase "my name" appeared, we added them together per the instructions hidden in the book, and then we plugged those coordinates into the Foxy alphabet grid to get the name Cassidy. Good game, everyone! Let's all treat ourselves to some orange slices and give ourselves a pat on the back for solving another piece of the lore. Except, that's not how it worked. You can imagine my surprise and confusion when the numbers got plugged into not the alphabet grid that was clearly being telegraphed to us, but rather the word search. And apparently we were right to do that, since Scott Cawthon himself confirmed in his FNAF movie announcement the critical role that a child named Cassidy plays within the lore. But all of this still means one thing: the alphabet grid is awkwardly left completely unused, despite it obviously needing to be used to solve one of the mysteries within this book. And that's where Wolfie1740 stepped in. In the book, there's one Cassidy question that's left hanging. On page 31, Cassidy asks, "Do you remember your name?" Of course he does. He's the crying child, duh. Crying child Afton. His friends call him Bite Victim for short. Just rolls off the tongue. But seeing that the logbook had helped to solve for Cassidy's name, Wolfie suspected that it might also be helpful in solving this other name, using, you guessed it, the Foxy alphabet grid. What Wolfie noticed was that the crying child specifically uses the night's 4 and 5 shift rating questionnaires to speak with Cassidy. For the first 3 nights, the section reads as follows: overall, fulfillment, health, stress, purpose, hope, and existential dread. But on nights 4 and 5, you have other things mixed in here, like I'm scared, and it was for me. So Wolfie reverse engineered things, taking Bite Victim's answers and matching them to the page numbers where Cassidy asks the question. To quote from Wolfie's own post, the first one is "I can hear sounds." The page it's responding to is 75, which says, "Does he still talk to you?" And one trend to notice is that all 4 pages have a piece of blood on it. Next is "It was for me," which is responding to page 103's question of "The party was for you." Third is "I can't see," responding to page 59's "What do you see?" And last is "I'm scared," which stumped me, so I went off of what I already had. End quote. He then fully filled out the Foxy chart with the alphabet, and going in the order that Bite Victim's answers appear, he followed the grid code to find the following 4 letters: E-V-A-N, Evan. After 6 years, could it possibly be that Evan is the name of the crying child? I'm not sure. Or at least I'm not convinced off of this alone. Don't get me wrong, I don't think that this is a bad theory at all. Quite the contrary, in fact. Anything that tries to figure out the true purpose of that stupid Foxy grid is gonna get credit in my book. The problem here is the methodology. Throughout the book, Cassidy asks a lot of questions, but only 4 of them actually matter. Wolfie also points out the bloodstains, but there are bloodstains on a lot of the pages throughout this book, not just those 4. And even then, an answer like "I can hear sounds" to the question of "Does he still talk to you?" it feels just a bit off. It's not very precise. You know, it feels random, arbitrarily trying to fit pieces together in a book that has been crafted to be anything but arbitrary. I mean, the Cassidy code alone required you to find 6 numbers, find a page that points to another page on what to do with those 6 numbers, and then translate all 6 of them into the word search. Multi-step puzzles like this have to be precise in order to work. And while the puzzle pieces in Wolfie's theory certainly fit, they fit a bit loosely, you know? I mean, even Wolfie admits that finding the last N was a bit of a stretch, and it forced him to break his own methodology. In fact, another Reddit user, Godzilla813105, tried to correct for that to find the N in a different way. One of the other lingering threads of the book is a series of tally marks written by Mike that never quite add up to anything. They're never used, or at least their true use has never been discovered, but again, similar to the Foxy grid, they must mean something, right? To quote from Godzilla's post, I realize that there's a magazine Foxy is holding on the first page of Night 1 that has 5-3 on it. When you add 5 and 3, you get 8. Then I took every single tally mark set in the book and added them together. I got this from the idea of how the whole quiz thing at the end of the shift says tally up your score. Putting all of these together gets you 47. 4-7 on the Foxy grid gives you the letter N, end quote. Again, it sounds good on paper, and I love the attempt to make sense of it all, but the why of it just doesn't line up for me. Why add tally marks to this number on Foxy's magazine? How are those elements related? And why would they be connected to a completely different set of 3 numbers gotten from a completely different set of clues? Plus, the story just doesn't hold. Contrary to what Godzilla says in their post, there is no tally up your score at the end of those nightly surveys. Thus, the rationale just doesn't hold up. In short, it all feels like we're convinced that we have a solution to the problem, and we're trying to back our way into how to get there. This is classic confirmation bias, where, as you conduct research, you try and find sources to justify your belief, or you retrofit the data to fit the conclusion that you're looking for. And I should know about confirmation bias, because lots of our theories over the years play with that very concept. Mario is a villain, provided you ignore all the times that he saves the kingdom. You play as the king in Hollow Knight, as long as you squint really hard during this one cutscene that might disprove that. For me, theories like those are all about telling a story, connecting dots that definitely exist within a game that flip your understanding of the plot, but also sometimes go against what is much more likely and probably much more intended by the developer. And the theories that I tend to focus on are the ones where you can connect a surprising number of dots, even if 1 or 2 tend to disprove it. They're just meant to be fun thought experiments, you know? I like playing with the lore of these worlds. But here with Fnaf, we have to be really careful. While I love both of these posts, Fnaf theories tend to be about trying to solve things, speaking things into the generally accepted canon, and as a result, the methods by which we come to conclusions require more scrutiny. And here, the methodology of arriving at the name Evan just doesn't hold up as well as I'd like. But that doesn't mean the name Evan doesn't hold up. Because here's the twist, friends. This isn't just coming from the logbook. Shortly after Christmas, the Fazbear Frights book series released its latest installment, Blackbird, and it contains what is to date the most moving story in this franchise. The Real Jake, short story number 2, tells the tale of 9-year-old Jake, who's dying as a result of a tumor in his brain. With his mother prematurely passed away and his father overseas in the military, Jake is under constant care by the young Margie. But there's one other special person in Jake's life, a mysterious figure named Simon, who speaks to him at night from a small cabinet in his room. Quote, "The first night Simon had talked to Jake, Simon had made it clear he would be in the cabinet until Jake got well enough to walk to the cabinet. When you can do that, I'll be here waiting for you." End quote. And while it seems like Simon should be a sinister force, since, you know, this is a FNAF book after all, it's actually an expression of love. Margie had created this small doll named Simon with a walkie-talkie inside of him that allows Jake's father to speak to his son, distorting his voice to make him sound younger. Simon, every night, insists that Jake speak about what the real Jake is doing, the one who isn't afflicted with cancer, the one who is outside playing with his friends. All of this was intended to give Jake hope, with Margie updating the doll every few nights with food stains and scrapes on his knees to reflect the adventures that the real Jake has been having. It's a beautifully sad story with some legitimate surprises that I'm actually not going to spoil here. But the reason I bring it up is that, strangely, it is the only one of the 18 Fazbear Fright stories so far that has no explicit connection to FNAF. At all. Zero. Every other story thus far has mentioned a Fazbear pizzeria or connected back to a familiar animatronic in some way. This one doesn't. Yes, it does have some lore connection to the ongoing Stitch Wraith storyline, but the lack of anything FNAF stands out like a sore thumb when every other story thus far has connected back in some way, which is why the name of Jake's father stands out so strongly. Jake's father is named Evan, which alone is interesting, but becomes much more noteworthy when you consider that he has a brother named Michael, his only living family. And not only that, this is how Michael is described in the book. Quote, he's a little different. He's intense about making money and he's really good at it. Just the way he is can make him seem like he's not human. So he's like a cyborg with bad programming, end quote. Two brothers, one named Michael who gets compared to a human-robot hybrid. Where have I heard that one before?
Father, it's me, Michael.
And that's just the surface level stuff, friends. Looking deeper, this is a story about a father communicating with his son via walkie-talkie, just like we see in Sister Location. Heck, you see him communicating through the walkie-talkie that is in a plushie. In the real Jake, it's Simon the doll with a walkie-talkie inside of him. In the games, it's psychic friend Fredbear with a walkie-talkie. Both children suffer from a severe head wound, Jake with his brain tumor and crying child with the bite of 83. In the story, Jake goes on to possess the Simon doll, only for him to then pass on to the Stitch Wraith, sharing that endoskeleton with another soul named Andrew. In the games, could it be that our crying child dies in the hospital and goes on to possess psychic friend Fredbear, which then somehow gets him passed into the Golden Freddy suit, where he then shares it with another soul named Cassidy? And all of this is happening in a story that has no connection to Fnaf, but very clearly has a connection to Fnaf. I'm just saying that the absence makes it all the more conspicuous. In short, I'm not convinced that the Fnaf survival logbook is solved or anything like that. Right now, I'm just not sure the methodology for arriving at a final name is really as solid as I'd like it to be to enter my personal headcanon. But strangely enough, the name Evan feels like we're onto something. It has some very compelling evidence to support it from the real Jake story. So at this point, I want to hear from you. Let me know. Are you sold on the crying child being Evan alongside his older brother Mike? Or is this yet another example of Scott trying to bury the lead a bit and confuse us by using the same name a bunch of times, shoving Michael in a bunch of places where he doesn't belong? All I know is that I can't wait for the next book coming out in March. At this point, forget Security Breach. It's all about those sick book drops, my friends. Because let's be honest with ourselves. At this point, uncovering the lore of FNAF requires more reading than your typical JRPG. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching. And hey, if you missed our first quest to solve the security logbook, that video is on screen right now. It properly conveys my frustration with the series. And if you're interested in joining us on our ongoing quest to solve all the Ladies and gentlemen, today we're kicking off Game Theory's 10th anniversary month. Yes, I am that old. April 18th will officially mark 10 years since the first episode of Game Theory was uploaded. For context, my debut was the same year that everyone fell in love with a Pop-Tart cat flying through space, and Rebecca Black's Friday was the most watched video on YouTube, and yet we still call them the good old days. Anyway, to celebrate the channel being older than dirt, all month long we'll be doing special events, like remastering an old theory or two, giving you a behind-the-scenes look at what it actually takes to do these things in 2021, and capping it all off with a live stream celebration on April 30th to thank you guys for an unreal decade of overanalysis. There's also a commemorative 10th anniversary gold foil shirt filled with Easter eggs from the past 10 years of episodes if you want to celebrate alongside us. That's available right now below this video and only until the end of the month, so if you're interested, grab it before it's gone. As for today's episode, well, it wouldn't be an anniversary of this channel without an episode about FNAF. And what better way to cover our longest running series than doing it rewind style?
Oh, that's hot.
Not that rewind. I'm talking about editing it in all the styles that we've had across the 10 years of this channel. So without further ado, let's talk about new developments in FNAF in game theory styles through the ages. Hello Internet, welcome to Game Theory, gaming's tangential learning experience. In the past few months, we've gotten a lot of new FNAF content. A gameplay trailer for Security Breach dropped, 2 new books that I haven't talked about yet, and there was even a bunch of images from the game revealed as part of a charity stream. And sometimes, dear Webiverse, you have ideas, random thoughts that are floating around your head, but not enough to make a full theory out of. Maybe enough for a game hypothesis perhaps, but not so much for a fully fledged theory. So today I'm gonna gonna nab those little theory nuggets hovering around my head and serve
Why
them
is
up
it
on
weird
a
for?
delicious platter for you to munch on. In true Fazbear Frights fashion, I'm gonna present to you 3 mini theories covering the upcoming security breach, the twists I expect that we'll see in the
That's
game,
cool.
and where the franchise might be headed next. Because I think the information is starting to leak out. With delays in this new game causing it to lag behind, I think other parts of the franchise, especially the books, are starting to surge ahead and might already be giving us clues as to life after the breach. So without any further ado, hop aboard, friendos, because this theory train is about to leave the station. Woo! Woo! Theory number 1, the Glamrocks are secretly toy animatronics. Recently, my good friend Dawko held a 24-hour charity stream benefiting the World Wildlife Fund, which, first off, congratulations to him to reaching his goal. The reason I bring the stream up here, though, is that as Dawko crossed different donation milestone goals, he was able to unlock screenshots from the upcoming security breach game, which, by the end, amounted to 20 images in total. And while most of them are just better angles of places that we saw in the recent gameplay trailer, there were a few that had details that really stood out. First was confirmation that Bonnie appears to be in the game in the form of Bonnie Bowl. Whether Bonnie is physically in the game or if this is just an Easter egg reference is unclear, but it's a huge detail because up to this point, Bonnie has been absent from all the imagery of the Glamrock animatronics, seemingly replaced by the newcomer Montgomery Gator. It had led everyone, myself included, to think that the game was just pulling a sister location where, if you'll remember, Chica was actually absent from the Funtime lineup, replaced by new characters like Baby and Ballora. But nope, Bonnie is here at the Pizzaplex. If not physically, then at the very least from a lore perspective, leaving the only missing face from the core 4 to be Foxy, and we'll get back to that in a minute. Other interesting shots included a view from what appears to be inside of Montgomery Gator's mouth. And while this certainly could be a walkway to a different part of his Gator Golf section of the restaurant, considering we see decorative heads on the walls and different photos from the stream, the view from inside this mouth just doesn't line up for me. It feels too high up to be a walkway, too closed of a mouth to have humans walking through it like they'd be walking through a golf course. Instead, and admittedly this is a bit of a long shot, could this be an indication that we're actually going to be riding inside of Monty at some point in this game? It might seem outlandish, but it actually fits with what's already been leaked out about this title. In case you weren't aware, Funko Pop leaked out this statue of Security Breach, where we see our character Gregory hiding inside of Glamrock Freddy, indicating that at least one of the animatronics, Freddy himself, will be working alongside us to survive against Vanny the Killer Rabbit. So why not the other animatronics too? Looking at the characters side by side, we see that both Freddy and Monty seem to have a similar build and the same flip-open chest cavity. And consider this, we're stuck in the Pizzaplex, meaning that we'll presumably need ways to unlock different sections as the night goes on. Maybe one way to do that is by unlocking new abilities from the animatronics themselves. We see in the gameplay trailer that Monty is able to break through locked chain link fences. Maybe instead of him using that ability to chase us, it's us inside of him using it to access new parts of the park. Kind of like Zelda, except, you know, animatronic murder themed. Like I said, bit of a long shot, but admittedly it'd be a pretty interesting gameplay mechanic that kind of aligns with stuff that we think we know about this new title, so just saying. However, the biggest reveal came with the last picture, where we see a shattered version of Glamrock Chica abandoned in what's labeled the sewer. And while that alone alludes to some darker sections of the game, it's how she's dismantled that I wanted to call attention to. Chica has no beak. And as anyone who's been on this 6-year ride alongside me might remember, Chica missing her beak in this series is a big deal. Way back in the days of Fnaf 4, Scott went out of his way to draw our attention to Toy Chica missing her beak.
So, completely out of nowhere, Scott emailed me saying, "Clue, during the minigames in Fnaf 4, why would the tiny toy Chica be missing her beak?" Oh my gosh, and even in the asset you see Chica's beak lying on the ground.
Wow, so many memories coming back from that one. Oh, that was such a cool stream and such a cool day. Anyway, the missing beak is a reference to two things. In Fnaf 4, there's a tiny toy Chica with a beak that's lying on the ground, which itself is a reference to way back in Fnaf 2, where the new version of Chica at the time, dubbed Toy Chica, would lose her beak when she went on the attack. So to see Glamrock Chica here missing her beak seems to be Scott and Steel Wool suggesting that she is none other than a reskinned version of the toy animatronic dating back to Fnaf 2. And while that might seem like a leap in logic, the closer you look, the more this seems to be the case. Look at the similarities in the face shape, eye size, and hair feathers between Toy Chica and Glamrock Chica. Same round head, same slimmer body shape. Heck, if we're truly getting old school with it, let's count fingers and toes, friends. 4 fingers and 3 toes on Glamrock Chica, just like the 4 fingers and 3 toes on Toy Chica, which, mind you, is not the same as every other iteration of Chica. Even the material that she's made out of appears to be the same, that hardened, glossy outer shell that would crack and shatter rather than rip or tear or mold like you see with the other old versions of the animatronics. Want even more proof? Remember how I said that Foxy isn't present in this game yet? Well, you know the only animatronic without a toy version? Foxy. It was true in Fnaf 2, no toy Foxy. It was true in the Fnaf 4 minigame. Bonnie, Chica, Freddy, but no Foxy. And here again, if these are indeed reskinned toy animatronics, there's no toy Foxy. Follow the missing Foxy, my friends. Follow the Foxy. Now, why would this matter? Well, it actually matters a lot. If you can remember back that far, the toy animatronics are actually meant to be friendlies to children. You don't have to take my word for it. Let's listen to another blast from the past explain it.
They've spent a small fortune on these new animatronics. Facial recognition, advanced mobility, they're all tied into some kind of criminal database so they can detect a predator a mile away. Someone may have tampered with their facial recognition systems. The characters have been acting very unusual, almost aggressive toward the staff. They interact with the kids just fine, but when they encounter an adult, they just stare.
They interact with kids just fine. The reason they attack us in the game is that we're an adult, a security guard that looks an awful lot like William Afton, but kids are fine. Again, if Security Breach is all about animatronics helping Gregory against the threat of Vanny, this makes perfect lore sense. Gregory is a kid. The toy animatronics are designed to protect kids. Coincidence? I think not. Between the visual similarities, the missing Foxy, and the lore connections, I think that this one might just be a slam dunk. But hey, that's just a theory. My first theory of the day. We've still got 2 more to cover. Theory number 2, Elizabeth Afton is the real villain. Over in Bookland, things are getting weird, which, you know, when it comes to a series where a rotting flesh suit filled with robot spaghetti is normal, is saying a lot. We'll get around to me being impregnated by a video game and giving birth to a baby rabbit in the next mini theory, but first, I wanted to touch on a security breach theory that I've been banging on for about a month now. The fact that we'll need to redeem Vanny the killer for some sort of good ending in this game. I feel like the evidence for this has been pretty convincing thus far. Her being called a reluctant follower in Fnaf VR's audio recordings, the fact that in Fnaf AR we have a series of emails from a character named Ness, as in Vanessa, Vanny, actively searching for such contradictory terms as help and how to induce compliance in human subjects, indicating Glitchtrap's control over her is not complete and she's trying to escape his grasp. There's more, but I've covered all that in much more detail in a previous theory. Suffice it to say, I feel good about that theory as it applies to Security Breach, but now we're getting even more evidence from outside of the games, via the most recent Fazbear Frights book, The Cliffs. At this point, we're at book number 7, so you're probably aware at how these things work. 3 short horror stories set in various corners of the Fnaf universe, followed by an epilogue that continues an ongoing narrative about a creature named the Stitch Wraith, with Scott telling us that details from these stories will give clarity to the lore of the games. So what's new this month? In the latest epilogue, we have a lot of things going on. William Afton, having just spontaneously exploded his body in a previous story, now possesses a bunch of trash and machine parts. He's basically acting like a vacuum, sucking in everything around him to create, no joke, a giant 15-foot tall trash rabbit that the book calls the Afton Amalgamation. And if you think that sounds weird, yes. Now, I am not gonna sit here and say that we will at some point in this series be forced to fight a giant trash bunny possessed by a serial killer. No, the reason I bring Trash Afton up is that what he does in the book seems relevant to our ongoing Vanny theory. Quote again, "The problem was that when the trash monster stabbed the detective, it infected him with the spirit of the horrible man who animated it." For sure, Afton's spirit would fill the detective with evil, but what if it did more than that? What if it killed him? Jake had to get the infection out. Afton, at this point in the lore, is just an infection, a virus that needs to be extracted in order to save the host's body, and it can be transferred just by a touch or a small wound. And so yet again, we get even more evidence for innocent people getting Afton infused into their bodies and needing to be cleansed, just like I've been predicting with Vanny this whole time. But there's another reason that I want to talk about this epilogue. Sure, the main action of the story is focused around our heroic detective teaming up with a Stitch Wraith to use the screaming mask of the puppet to destroy destroy the giant Afton trash bunny, which is every bit a fever dream insane as it sounds. But while all of this chaos is going on, there's someone else running around controlling things behind the scenes. Baby. Throughout the battle, we continuously catch short glimpses of a long-necked female animatronic. This, my friends, is Baby. The long neck is actually a callback to book 1 of the series and her story to be beautiful. Anyway, she fuses up with the Afton amalgamation until they start using the puppet mask against it, at which point she pieces out. And it's only then, after she leaves, that Afton loses. We get confirmation of this in the final sentences of the story. One final quote: "The awful man's spirit wasn't as powerful as it had pretended to be. Afton's spirit was barely hanging on to this reality. Something besides Afton had been controlling the trash rabbit, and whatever it was worse." The real threat here wasn't Afton at all, it was Baby. She's the one at the end of the story who escapes to fight another day. She's the one who leaves the cliffhanger. And that, my friends, is weird. Let me explain myself. I think everyone, Scott included based on his Reddit posts, was surprised when Security Breach didn't come out last year. And just like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, when you have an elaborate connected lore, release dates lining up matters a lot. Except for one problem. When the ship is already sailing and there are so many companies and moving pieces and agreements involved, changing launch dates becomes really hard and potentially really expensive. To my knowledge, the book release dates never really shifted despite the game getting delayed. So could this epilogue be a preview of what's coming after Security Breach? Think about it. In the Stitch Wraith story, Afton is doing what we expect him to do in Security Breach. He's acting like a virus infecting someone, in this case Vanny, who then needs to be cleansed. But then Fazbear Frights effectively ends Afton's story. It outright calls him weak. He's defeated by the mask, and it sets up Baby to become the ongoing big bad moving forward. What I'm saying is that what if this book was supposed to come after Security Breach had been released? But now, because of the game's delay, we're getting a preview of what it's setting up moving forward. In the trailer for Security Breach, we get this line:
"There is more going on here than you realize."
Maybe there really are some new tricks up this game's sleeve. But what could Baby be working on moving forward? Well, for that, it's time to talk about theory number 3. Theory number 3, the Body Snatchers. And now it's time for Matt Pat's final thought. Or final theory, I suppose. Man, those were really cringy for those first couple episodes. Why did I think that was a good idea? Anyway, I'll keep this one a bit shorter since the episode's getting long, but basically at this point we've got ourselves 21 short stories in Fazbear Frights, and they cover everything from haunted animals to killer dolls to deadly video games. But there's one consistent theme across a shocking number of these stories: body snatching. In book number 1, we have To Be Beautiful, where Baby steals a human girl's body piece by piece so she can take over her identity. In book number 2, we have Lonely Freddy, where a boy is lured to the back of a Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria and mind-swapped into a Freddy doll so the animatronic AI can go out into the real world posing as him. In book number 3, we have Room for One More, where mini-Renas shove themselves into a security guard's stomach so they can escape out into the surface world, a very direct parallel to the sister location ending. Book number 5 has In the Flesh, where... fine, I'll talk about this one. A male game designer, after a series of events, literally gives birth to a physical form of Glitch Trap by slicing him out of his own impregnated stomach. And of course, the game designer is named Matt. The guy is also a supreme jerk to everyone else throughout the story, so thanks a lot, Scott. Very subtle. Didn't know you felt that level of hostility toward me. But again, animatronics using humans to escape out into the real world, to become real or outright posing as their identity. And last, but probably most explicitly, is the latest story, He Told Me Everything, in which, and I'm gonna tell you what happens in the story, and you're not gonna believe me, but this is what happens in this story. A cult-like science club experiments using a substance called Fazgoo. The experiment involves the students pulling out one of their own teeth and feeding it to the goo, which then connects a gooey tendril to their finger. We eventually learn that the goo is draining the students' organs and bones in order to grow into a perfect clone of the original host. It is odd, and it really feels like it's pushing the limits of what can and can't exist in the Fnaf universe. Now, could all of this just be recycling the same ideas for horror stories in a series that now has an enormous number of installments and is in constant need of new content? Absolutely. But it is the strongest recurring theme in the book series, and one that, when coupled with the Afton infection concept, seems like it could very well be the next logical step for the games. Think of it like prop hunt for Fnaf. Who's real and who isn't? You don't know, you gotta figure it out. We've exhausted exhausted what one killer can do, so why not an army of killers? Besides, animatronics posing as real people is already something that Sister Location opened the door to, so if you have the ability to infect the masses, that's a new direction to take things, I guess. I'm just saying, we've had bad animatronics, looks like we'll have good animatronics, we've had people stuffed inside animatronics, we've had animatronics stuffed inside people. Now in the books, we're on a regular basis having animatronics turning into people. So why not an army of AIs inhabiting flesh-stolen suits? And if I'm right, and Baby is indeed filling the villain role for the series moving forward, seems like the sort of thing that she'd totally be into. Skin suits helped her escape Sister Location. She is literally able to be a body double for the protagonist Charlie in the original novel series. She's not a killer like her dad, she's a copier. A girl who's upset about dying young and losing her humanity early. So why not try to regain it back while creating an army of body snatchers to come along with ya? But hey, that's just a theory. 3 game theories. Thanks for watching for 10 years, guys. By the way, theorists, if you're worried about some creepy animatronic possessing you through your screen, then you'll really love our sponsor for today's episode, NordVPN. With Nord, you can rest easy knowing that no reanimated Lapin-themed serial killer is gonna steal your identity, because Nord is keeping your information safe behind a wall of next-gen
You stupid ghost thought you could get revenge on me? Do you know who I am? I'm William Afton. I always come back. I am Golden Bonnie.
I'm about to end this man's whole career.
Good animation.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the wet spring-lock suit clamping down on your subscription feeds. And oh my gosh, guys, finally, after all that waiting, after being patient for so long, after all the delays, it has finally arrived. It is here. A brand new Freddy game just released where we finally get to go up against Vanny the Killer Bunny. Here it is, Security Breach. Furries Rage. Didn't know it had a subtitle. Apparently it's about an onslaught of angry furries on the attack. Oh wait, sorry. Misread that title. It's a Fury's Rage. Very important distinction there. Well, anyway, let's fire this puppy up.
Let's see if they're ready for Freddy.
I'm so good looking.
Not quite what I expected on multiple fronts. A game-long apology for all the delays with the real Security Breach.
They're gonna kill me. They're gonna kill me when they find out that I have to delay the game again. What am I gonna do?
You can tell that Scott's feeling a little guilty these days, huh? Also, apparently he sleeps in a fairy tale bed. Learning a lot about you with this one, Scott. Anyway, just because the official game is still TBD doesn't mean that there's any less to theorize about. We've got a new book, we've got secret bosses, and we've got a lot of pent-up theories behind the floodgates just waiting to pour out. So today, I'm doing another roundup of short FNAF theories, some looking back to the past, some looking ahead towards the future, and some that are so out there that, well, you're gonna see when we get there. So open your minds, your hearts, and your hollow animatronic chest cavities reserved for the bodies of dead children, because I'm shoving theories in everywhere. Theory number 1, we definitely play as Michael Afton in FNAF 3. In the newest Fazbear Fright book, Gumdrop Angel, released at the beginning of May, we as always have our 3 main horror novellas. The first is the title feature, Gumdrop Angel, a tragic tale about a girl who transforms into a giant gummy bear piñata thing that gets eaten alive by a swarm of saliva-mouthed kids at a Freddy's birthday party. Talk about your hygiene concerns. This one became a whole heck of a lot scarier reading it in the aftermath of a global pandemic. But as you might imagine, not a whole lot of lore to be found in a story about a sentient gummy bear. Our second story, Sergio's Lucky Day, is all about Balloon Boy, or should I say Lucky Boy, a doll who's wearing a propeller hat and holding both a balloon and a sign that says, "I'm a lucky boy." In this story, our main character Sergio finds the doll and ends up buying a lottery ticket because of its advice. The next day, Sergio finds that he won himself $600,000.
I won a lottery!
That's great. It's a story that's a bit confusing because the doll does seem to offer good advice, encouraging Sergio to leave a job that he hates, leave a girlfriend girlfriend that he hates, upgrade his life in small ways, all things that improve Sergio's existence. But as a result, Sergio becomes obsessed with the doll, asking it for advice on everything, including how he can look good for his big high school reunion. Lucky Boy suddenly takes the chance to turn evil and tells him to remove his ears, scalp himself, cut off his eyelids, chisel his lips, trim his nose, and remove and reuse other body parts to become taller. As you might imagine, Sergio makes a big impression at the reunion. Again, not a whole lot to say here since it seems so tangential to the character from the games. I'm assuming that this is going to end up being connected to the upcoming Book 9 story, The Puppet Carver, but we're just going to have to wait and see. And just when you thought that this book wasn't going to deliver on any lore reveals, we get to our third story, What We Found, which is quite literally just a retelling of Fnaf 3. Stop me if this one starts to sound familiar. A night security guard working at Fazbear Frights, a horror attraction themed around the murders and disappearances happening at the Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria franchise, begins suffering from severe hallucinations the day the crew brings in a Springtrap suit found hidden in the walls of a different building. Hudson, our night guard, winds up trapped in a pizza oven and gets roasted to death at the end of his shift. It is really sad and also a really obvious parallel to the events of Fnaf 3, right? But here's the thing, it also really feels like it's meant to confirm for us that Michael Afton is who we play as in Fnaf 3. If you remember back to a couple years ago, I had a theory that Mike Afton is our player character in pretty much every game in the franchise. We see the name Mike on Fnaf 1's paycheck, we see the name Mike again on the Monitor and Sister location. In fact, the player's guide for that game, The Freddy Files, practically confirms that part of the theory. So that's Mike appearing in 2 games, but what about Fnaf 2 and 3? The name Mike doesn't appear anywhere in either of them. Well, in Fnaf 1, we know that Mike eventually gets fired for tampering with the animatronics and his odor. Something that would happen if, you know, he was a rotting corpse walking around from restaurant to restaurant to free the souls of the dead kids trapped in the suits put there by his father. So isn't it a little coincidental that Fritz Smith, our protagonist from Fnaf 2, gets fired for the exact same reasons, tampering with the animatronics and odor? It's also why Michael would keep getting attacked. We know from Sister location that he looks just like his dear old daddy. And lastly, it's why Golden Freddy says it's me every time he appears. It's the brother's soul crying child trapped in the suit, recognizing and reaching out to his sibling Mike. But then what about Fnaf 3? When I first presented the theory, I thoughtfully omitted Fnaf 3. It made sense to me from a narrative angle, but in terms of actual physical evidence, there wasn't a whole lot to point to outside of the hallucinations. Since the phantom animatronic jump scares in Fnaf 3 were moments pulled from both Fnaf 1 and 2, it implies that the person seeing them must have been present in both those locations. But beyond that, yeah, bupkiss. However, what we found may have just given us our missing piece. Our security guard Hudson in the story has a very tragic existence. His dad took his own life at an early age, and his mother got remarried to an abusive man named Lewis. And this guy is awful. Like, he is real bad. Eventually, we learn that Hudson seems to have burned his house down, killing this violent man in the process, and then repressing those memories. Fast forwarding back to the present day, as he's tormented by Springtrap, he hears his dad's voice coming from the suit. That, along with a former abusive teacher named Mr. Atkin, or Mr. Adkin, depending on which page you're talking about. I'm looking at you, proofreaders. You got some splaining to do. Anyway, Hudson kills his violent father in a fire. A father whose voice comes out of Springtrap, along with another person associated with childhood trauma and with a name suspiciously close to Afton. The security guard himself then dies in a fire in a tightly contained pizza oven. To me, it sounds a heck of a lot like the journey of Mike, who would also be responsible for burning his spring-trapped serial killer father to death at the end of Fnaf 3 before he himself meets a fiery end in Fnaf 6, also trapped inside of a small box. It's potentially the confirmation that I've been waiting on for years. Or not, who knows? Speaking of Fnaf 3, here's a small observation that didn't fit anywhere, but I wanted to call out. You know how we're pretty confident that Golden Freddy was possessed by 2 spirits, Crying Child and Cassidy, the Vengeful Spirit? Well, it seems like Scott may have been hinting at that since Fnaf 3. I couldn't believe it either, but take a look. Here's a photo of the bad ending from that game. Notice how the mask in the background, Golden Freddy, has 2 lights on in its eyes instead of just 1 like all the others? Each light would be representative of a spirit trapped in the suit. Shout out to Game Theorist subreddit user The Real Bruffi for that one. And while we're on the subject of Cassidy, theory number 2, Cassidy died in the ball pit. Recently, it was confirmed by Scott Cawthon on Reddit that the Fazbear Frights book series